If you could do the roll call, please.
Chairman Aida, Commissioner Carlo.
He's here. Mike's here.
Oh, okay. Commissioner Claffey,
Here.
Commissioner Fox,
Here.
Commissioner Payne,
Here.
Commissioner Sobieski,
Here.
Commissioner Woods, Commissioner Vitalica, Commissioner Graverman,
Here.
Commissioner Giangrave.
Okay, we're going to put Commissioner Braverman in for Commissioner Woods. Mr. Town Planner, approval of the agenda.
Yes, Mr. Vice Chairman, 3 items that I recommend being removed from the agenda. Under new business, item A, this is the Newington Ridge Preserve site plan. The applicants have withdrawn their application because they ran out of time, and they will resubmit both after they've revised the plans and after they've gotten the sign-off from the homeowners association.
Okay.
And I think there may be people here to speak to that one, so you'll let them speak at it
We're
under
going to
public.
let them speak at public participation before we go into public participation.
I also recommend removing item new business C, site plan approval for 181 Patricia Genova Drive. Hartford Hospital, they've gotten a request from Jefferson House to increase the amount of expansion, so they've withdrawn those. They've asked to table those plans to give them time to make them even bigger for Jefferson House's benefit. And then finally, the executive session item, I recommend deleting that because the town attorney does not have any new information for you.
Okay, any commissioners have any questions on that? Everybody is all set? Okay. We're going to, just before we go into public participation, we're going to go into the Newington Ridge Preserve. I'll ask them if they have anything. You can come forward and address the commission.
Hi, my name is Cheryl Rocco, and I'm the president of the Homeowners Association for Newington Ridge. Just here to touch base with you. I was here about a year ago. We came with safety concerns about a decomposing road, and I'm here still with a decomposing road. A lot has happened in a year, and nothing has happened in a year. So my question is to you, what do you want us to do now? Because, as we know, the timeline that was provided by the builder has not been complied with. The state of the road is still decomposing. Last year I was concerned with the winter, and when we came to you, it was too late to do anything about paving because of the weather and the season, and I had 2 contractors out looking, and they said, we don't pave now. We addressed this with the commission last year, and you guys said, you know, we're going to make the best of it this winter. We're going to all cross our fingers. We're going to give the builder a chance. And we haven't seen anything happen. Last week, MDC was out looking because the state it's in a worse state as it was. The manhole covers are very high now because it's still settling. Around the cul-de-sac, it's decomposing. I'm having a problem getting plowing people to be able to come in. They don't want to use their equipment because it's ruining their equipment because of the raised, you know, we've been through committees, we've been through permits, we've been through all of the hoops that you asked us to jump through, and nothing's happened. And I guess at this
Well, it's inappropriate to say nothing's happened. The contractor's working on it. I'll have the planner give you an update on everything.
I'm very updated on what's happened.
Okay, so I mean.
But I'm sorry, I disagree with you that the builder has done anything at all. We came to you with a safety concern about the condition of the road. That road is still in that same condition, if not worse. And my concern is that we are going to go through another winter. This is the time that I want to be booking the pavers in. I want at least a minimum, a new binder course. You have the money in the bond. I'm asking, the association is asking for money to be released so we can have a contractor come out and give us a new binder course, because I do not believe, I believe a year is plenty of time for Michael to have gotten this done.
Well, I guess you and Michael have to reapply and then get through the wetlands problem. And we could schedule at our next meeting, if you guys maybe put it on the agenda, for a more in-depth conversation concerning the road.
What would that in-depth conversation look like? The road is decomposing?
Well, I'm very familiar with the road. I've been there. I was there today. I looked at things. There is only one manhole that's exposed a little bit. I'm very familiar with the road.
I saw you there this morning. I know you're familiar with it. I know everyone here is familiar with it. You've all visited the site. We were told and assured we would not be facing this for another winter, and now we are facing this for another winter.
I'd have to dig up the minutes. We said we'd do the best we can. We're trying to do the best we can. I'll ask the other commissioners if they have anything they want to add. We have to have a more in-depth conversation about this with the contractor here.
So I'm asking for help and advice, and you're telling me that we need to have another conversation? I'm just curious what I need to do as a president of an association and tell these residents what we're going to do to solve this problem.
Are you going to work with the contractor to sign and reapply for the drawings that are at a standstill now?
I would like a binder course. I would like the money from the bond released so that I can get a contractor to give me a binder course.
Okay.
That's what I want.
Okay, the commission will talk about it later, and we'll have to put something like that on the agenda, I guess, and have a conversation about it, but now's not the time. Okay?
When is the time for me to reach out to you?
I just said that we will be putting it on the agenda. Town planner, for the next meeting, put it on the agenda so the commissioners can have a full talk about it, and to address your concerns. Commissioner Fox.
Through the chairman, Craig, when you schedule that, I think I'd like to see the town attorney here if we're going to talk about releasing the bond, because if you remember when we discussed that earlier in the year, there was some trepidation, there was some, confusion. So I would like to see them, getting this binder done, because it's already August. And, if we take too much time, they'll be stuck again.
Okay, good point. We'll have the town attorney here too for that conversation. Yes, anything else?
Is there more that we need to know from you between what Michael Massimino up to this point? I haven't seen anything new other than they removed the dirt.
They're tied up with the wetlands right now, right?
Explain that, because I didn't know they were tied in wetlands.
Well,
So
that's very complicated, and I'll talk to that, but let me
And
throw
how
one
does
quick
that-
thing, is that he was supposed to do a core sampling of the road to determine the condition of the subbase. He was supposed to do that, I think, back on June 15th. He has not done that.
okay.
So he has missed the one deadline he was supposed to meet.
So how does now this new wetlands
Well, it doesn't.
situation
Right.
bode
It's
well with
certainly,
what this committee now can do? That seems new to me, because there wasn't a wetlands issue 6 months ago, or was there, and I never saw it.
right.
You,
Right, the wetlands issue is, well, as you recall, several months ago, the commission wanted him to revise the plan to show all the changes that had happened over the years without TPZ approval, and to show the changes that they've asked to
Yeah, the
delete the gazebo.
sidewalk and
Right.
some
So
other-
he's been in the process, well, he submitted a plan showing the changes that had already been made without approval and some things they want to do differently. That's the plan that the vice chairman was alluding to that's held up in the Wetlands Commission. But there's nothing holding the developer back from finishing the road. He has always had that power, and he's got that power today to finish the road. So the homeowners are legitimately puzzled as to why he doesn't just finish the road.
Yes, Anthony. Yeah. No, Anthony's wanted to finish. Go ahead.
I guess, because I remember now talk about like the lower detention pond, he was changing some configurations there. I guess that's where it pulls into the wetlands. But was there a wetlands problem on the backside, like of lots 1 to 4? Because I know there were some problems with walls there and who had the railing and who would put a railing in this, and this changed. So before we start going back and forth, of to date, there has been progress, but not to the road.
Correct.
So the road is still the last piece.
Yeah, he was waiting to get the foundations in so that the heavy trucks aren't going to ruin the next course.
Have any foundations gone in?
No,
No.
no.
Okay.
So we're going to have an in-depth conversation at our next meeting. We'll have it on the agenda. We'll have the town attorney here. Does that make everybody happy? Yes, Commissioner Fox.
Mr. Chairman, can we also have Mr. Massimino here as representative? For one thing,
We will
I don't-
invite him.
Maybe I'm talking out of turn, but I'd like to hold his feet to the fire.
Okay. Very good. We'll invite the contractor and naturally the homeowners association and public are more than welcome to come. So that takes care of that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go into public participation for items not listed on the agenda. Speakers are limited to 2 minutes. Anybody have anything? Okay, next thing on the agenda is zoning enforcement officer report. Does any of the commissioners have a question for the planner on that? If not, we'll move along.
Only question I had, Mr. Chairman, is where we're at with the items of Buena Vista, the neighborhood, Buena Vista, 7th Ave, 8th, all in through there.
I don't, excuse me, I don't have firsthand knowledge of that. The CEO will be at the next
This is the
meeting.
third meeting I've come to and asked that same question, and both yourself and/or Mike has said you have no information on it. Just telling you what residents are asking of me. I'd like to see some progress on where we're at in that neighborhood, beginning to Blythe and/or zoning violations.
The CEO will be at the next meeting in 2 weeks,
Okay,
and I'll remind him that
Okay.
you'll want some answers.
thank you.
Okay, anything else from commissioners? Any remarks from commissioners? Okay, we're going to go into the, before we go into the first public hearing, if the secretary could read the procedures for the public hearing.
The order of proceedings at a public hearing shall be as follows. A, convening by a chairman. B, reading of the notice by the commissioner, commission secretary.
Microphone closer, please.
Hold on. Reading of the notice by the commission secretary or a commissioner designated by the chairman to act in his stead. C, identification and location of the property involved by the town planner. D, a statement of the issue to be considered by the chairman or the town planner. E, presentation by the applicant limited to 20 minutes unless a specific extension is granted by the chair. F, persons wishing to speak in favor of the application limited to 2 minutes per person. G, persons wishing to speak in opposition to the application limited to 3 minutes per person. H, rebuttal by the applicant limited to 5 minutes total. I, rebuttal by the opposition limited to 5 minutes total. During the public hearing, it shall be within the discretion of the chairman whether the time limitation shall be varied slightly, provided the commission consents to any such variance. In no case shall the extension for more than 20% of the allotment indicated above or 1 minute, whichever is greater.
Thank you very much. Could you read the petition 24-18, please?
Petition 24-18, zoning text amendment, new section 3.26, workforce assistant housing district. In accordance with CGS, section 8-30G, Dakota Partners Incorporated, applicant Timothy S. Hollister, 1 Constitution Plaza, Hartford, Connecticut, contact.
Thank you very much. Okay, as you know, for the record, the chairman has recused himself on this. He doesn't believe it's a conflict, but his son owns a property next door, so that there's no appearance, he's recused himself. And for the record, I want to disclose that Attorney Hollister represented me some time ago for the Firestone case, which you're all well aware of. But I'm not part of that anymore, and I don't believe I'm a conflict in any way. And I'll now turn it over to the applicant.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Chairman, Commission members. I am Attorney Tim Hollister from Hartford. Development team that is with me tonight is Roberto Arista from Dakota Partners, Will Walter, professional engineer from Benish and Company in Glastonbury, Steve Allman, traffic engineer also from the Benish and Company, and Jesse Thompson, who is an architect with Kaplan Thompson Architects in Portland, Maine. First thing I'd like to raise is our intention is to give you one presentation covering the text amendment and the zone change and the site plan. So I think that's just more efficient. So I think it'd be appropriate for you to read the notice of the Part B of the of your agenda.
Okay, we'll have the secretary, if you could read the petition 25-18, please.
Petition 25-18, zoning map amendment at 550 Cedar Street. In accordance with the CGS section 8-30G, Dakota Partners Incorporated, applicant Stop and Shop Supermarket Company LLC, owner Timothy Hollister, 1 Constitution Plaza, Hartford, Connecticut. Contact.
And we could keep the site plan, some of the detail on the site plan separate.
Correct.
Correct, okay.
At the end of the hearing, you're going to want to vote separately on each one, so it'll work out procedurally in any event. Just a couple of procedural items to cover for the record. In terms of our compliance, in compliance with your relatively new regulation, we published a print ad in the New Britain Herald on July 28th. We have posted a sign outside the property on July 26th. We have filed with the town clerk's office more than 10 days ago a copy of the proposed regulation and the rezoning map, and we verified that the published notices have referred to the applicable statute. Mr. Chairman, you mentioned the time limit at the beginning. As I said, we're going to try to make a fairly straightforward and I hope hopefully efficient presentation. I think I would time it out at about 50 minutes, if I may have the commission's.
I'm going to be lenient on the time for you and the public.
Thank you. That's appreciated. So what we're going to do is we're going to make our initial presentation, and then we no doubt will ask for the hearing to continue at your next meeting on August 22nd. And part of that is that there's one, as we'll get into, there's one piece of the puzzle regarding the cleanup of some contamination by the prior user that is still ongoing, and we will have that part of the application finalized in the next couple of days, and we're discussing that actively also with the Wetlands Commission. So, Mr. Minor, if you could gin up the first slide. And by the way, I do want to thank Mr. Minor for his logistical help in getting us.
Hold off on thanking me.
Okay. That's not a photo of our property.
Be wary of what you open.
Yeah. No, that's not it.
Sir, close that door. Lower left there, Craig?
Right. Start
PowerPoint?
down here.
No, not that. Not that far.
That low.
That one. Nope, to your right.
This one.
That one looks like it.
That look.
No, that's not it.
No, that's something else. Yeah, usually when I click on one of these, it gets me to the directory, and then from there.
All right, well, I've just passed out paper copies. I can work from those. You want me to do that?
Yes, and while you're making your presentation, I'll try to find your presentation.
Okay. All right, so, Commissioners, what I've just passed out are 4 items. There's a summary of our presentation outline. There is a bound set of supplemental materials, which is just nothing that changes the plan. It's just some supplemental points that we'll be referring to in our presentation. and then a copy of the slides. So I'm going to refer to the bound copy of the slides as we go through. So if the commissioners will look at slides 2 and 3, and what I've just given you, I think the most important starting point for this is that this is a redevelopment of a former commercial site, 550 Cedar Street, which from the late 1960s until approximately the early 2000s was inhabited by a company called Crest Motors, which was a car dealer and auto service facility. I believe their brands were Pontiac and Mazda. And as you can see from slide number 2, the site was almost completely paved when they were in operation, except for the slope on the west side. And then if you look at slide number 3, that shows the site with the buildings demolished. That is a 2016 aerial photo. And you can see that some of the former pavement had been overgrown since the demolition. Now, the current zone of this property is PD planned development. The property is owned by Stop and Shop. Now, I don't know this for sure. I am told that Stop and Shop looked at it and bought it perhaps to prevent someone else from establishing, establishing a shopping center on that site, or I should say a grocery store. But in any event, Stop and Shop is the owner. The abutting uses to the left, which is west, we have the Amtrak railroad tracks. To the north, we have an industrial commercial facility. Immediately to the right, the east, is a Dunkin' Donuts, and then across the street to the south, that's Route 175, is an industrial facility that has been there also for some time. As I mentioned earlier, the site has been basically not just vacant, but under remediation because 10, 15 years ago when Crest was folding up its business, it was determined that there was petroleum product contamination in the soil. And basically what's been happening with the site during all this time is a cleanup process supervised by the Connecticut Department of Environmental Protection. And logically, I think now that that process is nearing its end, the property has come back on the market, and my client, Dakota Partners, is now interested in finishing the cleanup and redeveloping the property, putting it back on the tax rolls as multi-family housing. And Craig, if you could just go to slide number 7, I'll work off that one. One more. There we go. So that's the rendered site plan. So what's before you, commissioners, and I'm now turning to the sort of the technical zoning side, is a 3-part application, which, as I said, we're going to present together. There's a proposed new regulation, and by the way, the current version of the regulations, there was Mr. Minor and I worked out a correction, but if you look at the materials that I just gave you bearing yesterday's date, tab number 2 is the current version. It is a proposed new section 3.26 workforce assisted housing zone, and I'll explain what that is. Part 2 is to rezone the subject property to this workforce assisted housing, and then part 3 is the site plan. Now, the question that obviously comes up is why a new regulation, and why have we drafted it to be specific to this site and applicable nowhere else in the town of Newington? Well, the first reason is for a new regulation is it's over time it's developed that a best practice in land use is to combine clear, specific dimensions and standards for the proposed use, especially when it's multifamily residential. Combine that with the rules that will govern the proposed residential program, a good portion of which will be subject to the so-called workforce housing requirements. There's no existing Newington regulation that has this combination, and rather than dismantle or do violence to one of your existing town regulations, it started to feel like a square peg in a round hole. We decided the better way to go, and we've done this on at least 50 other developments in Connecticut across during the past 25 years, is to just draft a new regulation, very much modeled on the standards of the Newington zoning regulations, but proposing standards and a combination that is specific to this site. The other reason that it's site-specific is so that this hearing, the commission only needs to consider this particular site. You don't have to look at where else across the town of Newington the regulation might be applicable. Next point is that the zoning application, all three parts, are submitted under General Statutes, Section 8-30, Sub G. Now, what does that mean? First, I'm sure people are often confused. This is not a so-called Section 8 based development. Section 8 is a federal rent subsidy program where the federal government actually, provides funds to people directly for housing. Sometimes developments are based on the assumption that they will be filled with Section 8 residents. This is not that type of development. It just happens to be that Connecticut's law that governs this type of development is in Title 8 of the General Statutes, but this is not a Section 8 based development. So under Section Connecticut General Statutes 830G, there are two types of development. One is called a 30% set aside. In that type, that is generally a privately financed proposal where, let's say, if you were proposing 100 units, 30%, 30 units would be set aside for 40 years for moderate and low-income households. The second category is called assisted housing, not to be confused with assisted living, which is a medical facility, but assisted housing means that there's a government financing program involved, and in return for the developer and the builder getting funds to help construct the facility, they have to follow the government's rules regarding maximum household income and maximum rent. So this is a so-called assisted housing. Now, the other part of the way the Connecticut General Assembly has set up 830G is it's intended to give applicants a way to propose regulations and developments that might not otherwise be allowed by local zoning. Back in the 1980s, there was a so-called Blue Ribbon Commission, which determined that for better or for worse, there's a need across the state of Connecticut for rental housing for moderate income and low-income households, and zoning commissions just were not approving it. So the rule here, very important for everybody to understand this rule for this hearing, is that the application cannot be denied by the zoning commission unless there is evidence in the record that the proposed construction will result in a specific type of harm that constitutes a substantial public health or safety concern that, quote, clearly outweighs, unquote, Newington's need for more lower-cost housing. The other aspect of this is that the commission, if there's a way to, if concerns come up and they can be addressed by approval conditions, if feasible, then there's an obligation to not just say no, but to try to deal with the issue with a condition, excuse me. Now, the next thing is, what is Newington's need for more lower-cost housing? And in our original application package dated July 7, I gave you an affordable housing needs package. We compiled this for just about every application that we do of this type. And what it shows is the following. First of all, the state of Connecticut, the Department of Housing maintains what is called the 10% list, which is a count that's done every year. Mr. Minor's office provides the data to the Department of Housing. It's a count of the units that are affordable in some way or another. Either they're deed restricted or they're government subsidized as a percentage of the total housing units in the town. There are 169 towns in Connecticut. 30 towns are over the 10%, and all the rest are under the 10%. Newington is under the 10% at 8.2%, and that's how the state determines that the 830G type of application is allowed in the town of Newington and as 135 other towns. So in terms of need, some of the materials in the needs assessment that I've given you show that 20% of Newington's housing stock is rented, whether it's multifamily or single family. Only 15% of the housing stock is apartments. And interestingly, the median rent, the average rent in town is almost $1,600 per month. So it's quite on the high end, and indicating a need for lower rents for households that can't afford $1,600 per month. The last thing that's in the needs package is that, over the years, there's often a lot of misunderstandings about so-called affordable or moderate and low-income housing. There are myths, frankly, about the number of school-age children that live in these developments and negative impacts on property values. And I've given you several national and regional studies that just show that those perceptions simply have proven to be not true in reality, particularly developments like the one in front of you tonight. Time and time again, there's concern, and then it ends up being a wonderful new addition to the housing stock of the municipality. So this is, at the end of the day, this is so-called workforce housing, and I'll show you in a minute the specific residential program. Now, I realize I'm sort of going into technical detail here, but I think it's important to just kind of touch on this at the beginning. Construction financing is through a program, the government financing that I mentioned. It's called the Federal Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program. And in the materials that I've given you tonight at tabs 3, 4, and 5, there's some information sheets that explain it in fairly simplified terms, but I'll just give you the basics. So basically, Connecticut receives from the federal government annually an allocation of what are called tax credits, which are used to help the development of this type of housing. The tax credits, it's a dollar figure nationally and then allocated among the 50 states based on state population. And in Connecticut, the Connecticut Housing Finance Authority, which is based in Rocky Hill, decides who gets the tax credits. It's based on an application that has a point system, and I've given you a sample application at tab 5 of the August 7th materials, just so you can see what CHFA prioritizes in terms of giving out these tax credits. Now, what a tax credit is it's a dollar-for-dollar reduction in someone, and usually it's a corporation that's investing, but it's a dollar-for-dollar reduction of their tax liability. So if a corporation has $50,000 in tax liability, they can actually buy a tax credit and reduce their liability accordingly. So basically, the government is forgiving the tax on the in return for the investor giving the money, with the conditions of its use to the builder developer, so that they have money to go ahead with their proposal. So if Dakota Partners applies for a tax credit allocation and receives it, then they sell the tax credits to investors, and they have the money to proceed. The quid pro quo is that they have to comply with the rules regarding rents and maximum incomes. So, Craig, if you can go to slide number 8. So this is an important slide because it really gives you the reality of what the residential program would be here. So this is 108 units, and the way this plays out is that there are a certain number of units that will be leased, and you can see the maximum rents in the right-hand column, and then in the second from right, the maximum household income. So there is a range of maximum incomes here within the development of about a little over $18,000 on the low end and almost $53,000 on the high end. There are also a group of so-called market rate units where the rent can be whatever the market will bear. They're projecting $1,090 per month for the one-bedroom units that will be at market rate, and more than $1,300 per month for the two-bedroom units that will be at market rate. And by the way, all those rents are without utilities, so utilities would be on top of that. Now, the next piece is there is an affordability plan, which is how the rules of incomes and rents will be administered on a day-to-day basis. And that is in your application package, the original package, July 2nd at tab number 8. And I'm not going to go through that except to say that the importance of that plan is it makes the rules enforceable by this commission and your zoning enforcement officer. It's basically a restrictive covenant. It's rules that you can enforce just like any other zoning regulation. Another part of the affordability plan is there is a commitment, it's actually in Schedule B of the affordability plan, that Dakota has committed as an enforceable rule to a level of quality materials and finishes and amenities such that the restricted units and the market rate units will basically be built out identically. There will be no distinction in how they look or how their quality level, and they will, of course, be interspersed throughout the building. So you have in the plan and in the application an enforceable set of rules that you know exactly what you're getting and you know the level of quality that you're getting. Let me finish up my presentation with a couple of notes about the residential program. There will be an on-site manager available 24/7. Every lease will contain what are called occupancy standards, no overcrowding, no undercrowding, in the sense of not more than 2 people per bedroom, so 4 people maximum total in a 2-bedroom unit, and at least 2 people in a 2-bedroom unit. I mentioned the annual compliance reporting, which occurs by January 31st of every year. Now, property taxes is not a legal basis for making decisions about land use, but I did ask Dakota to estimate the property tax payment that this development would make. It's about $170,000 a year, and relatively few municipal services, I think, to draw from that. Estimated population total for 108 units between 180 and 190. And again, though not legally relevant, we did look at an estimate of the school-age children that would live in the 108 apartments, and our estimate, and this comes from the best regional and national sources that we can find, is approximately 32. The reality is that 1 and 2, your courtesy is appreciated, thank you. 1 and 2 bedroom apartments really do not have very many school-age children. But of those 32, we think about half would be relocations within the town of Newington. So on a net basis, approximately 16 new students in the school system, and that would be K through the 12th grade. So that's the residential program. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to have Mr. Arista from Dakota Partners go first, and then we will follow the outline that I've given you through to the end. So, Mr. Arista.
Thank you, Tim. Good evening. My name is Roberto Arista. I'm a principal at Dakota Partners. If you could...
If we could have some quiet, please. Please go ahead.
If you wouldn't mind going ahead with the slides. I just wanted to say a few things about who we are. We're a company based in Massachusetts in a town called Waltham, just outside of Boston, right on 128. You may or may not be familiar with it. I founded the company with my partner, Mark Daigle, who isn't here tonight, in 2006. In the last 12 years, we've developed properties in 5 states, Massachusetts, Connecticut, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, and Virginia. Our focus is on workforce and affordable housing. And we're focused on it primarily because we believe that affordable housing is a very important component of any economy. It provides housing for working families that otherwise couldn't afford to live in the community where they work. And typically, these include people who are in jobs that, unfortunately, in our system, don't pay as much as other jobs, like service workers, like EMTs, like nursing aides, like young school teachers, et cetera. So our portfolio so far includes about 1,000 units across these states for a value of about $300 million. We build high-quality construction and energy efficient. As you heard before Tim saying, that the units are indistinguishable between what is affordable basically restricted rent and market rate. And on the energy efficient side, our architect, Jesse Thompson, will explain that this project will be passive house, which is sort of a new standard in energy efficiency. We've done new construction projects, ground up like this one, and we've also done a number of historic renovations. The historic renovations, our historic renovations have all won preservation awards. 2 of those are in Hartford, which I'll show you in a moment in one of our slides. We are very familiar with these complex financing structures which involve the tax credits and other loans from the state. And we deal with CHFA, Connecticut Housing Finance Agency, DOH, and other such agencies. We also have done in Hartford, complex buildings with funding even from the city and CRDA. So they're true public-private partnerships. As Tim mentioned before, we hold our properties for the long term. We have professional management manage the properties. We don't do the property management ourselves, and because this is a very specialized business and it requires some professionals in the business. The company we use here in Connecticut and Massachusetts is Halkeen, and I'm going to say a few things about them a little bit later. But let me show you, if you can move to the next slide, just a couple of examples of projects we've done here in Connecticut. In Connecticut, we've actually won awards for 8 projects, and I'm going to show you a few here. This one is Laurel Hill in Brookfield, Connecticut. It includes 72 units, and these are all 2-bedroom units. And it was ground-up construction, 3 buildings, and it was financed through tax credits and some other funding from the state. If you could turn to the next one. This one is a project called Barton Commons in New Milford, Connecticut. It's a smaller project. This one is, I think, is 42 units, and it is also a project that was financed through tax credits. All of these have a small component of market, just like we're proposing here, typically about 20%. If you could go to the next slide. This is a historic renovation in downtown Hartford called Allen Street, and this one is actually mostly market rate. It only has 20% of the units as restricted rent. This one was completed in 2015, It's 63 apartments. They're all 1-bedroom units, and they were really for basically the city dwellers. The next project, also in Hartford, this one's right on Capitol Avenue, which is the street that the Capitol building is on. It's just down the street from that. This was an old mill that sat vacant for about 10 years. It was born as a Pratt & Whitney machine shop, and everybody knows that Pratt & Whitney is still in existence today. And we turned it into 112 units of housing, a mix of 1 and 2s and some 3s. And this was also financed through tax credits and state funding and the Capital Region Development Authority and the City of Hartford. And all of these projects are, very successful. I would welcome you to go and visit them if you have time, because they are top quality and they're very nice. I'll move next to just talking a little bit about Halkeen, the management company we use. They operate along the eastern seaboard, so they go all the way to Florida. They manage about 9,300 units. Their specific expertise is running properties like these. They've been in business for 25 years, and they employ a staff of about 750. Just a couple of examples of projects that they've managed. I'm just going to show you some that are all over the place. One in Massachusetts, another one in Rhode Island, just to show you the geographic reach they have. And then the next slide shows one in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and the other one in Florida. Again, they manage many, many properties, and they've worked very well for us, and they currently manage every single one of our properties. That concludes my presentation of Dakota Partners. If you have any questions of me, I'm happy to answer them now or later. Okay.
Commissioners, do you have any questions? Yes, Commissioner Fox.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When you were talking about capital lots,
Yes.
you mentioned 1, 2s, and 3s. Now, are these projects in workforce-assisted housing districts?
So capital loss is only 20% affordable and the rest is market.
I see, but is the zoning workforce-assisted housing?
I don't think it was. That was a project that was by right multifamily, so we could build it out without getting any kind of zoning relief.
Oh, right, because you mentioned 3 bedrooms in 3.26.7. Got a max of 2 bedrooms. That's
Well,
what
that was,
confused me.
okay.
It was just an example.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
So the next person to present is Will, our civil engineer, who will go through the site plan with you.
Thank you, Roberto. Good evening, Commission members. For the record, Will Walter, professional engineer with Alfred Bernesh and Company. Can we go to slide 3, please? And I want to talk a little bit about the existing conditions and what's out there right now. If the commission members have gone out there, then you'll know. It's basically a sea of dilapidated pavement and old foundation structures. Given oriented, of course, Cedar Street runs east-west on the southern side of the property. To the west is the railroad tracks. To the east is Dunkin' Donuts and the pavement.
Hold on one second.
Oh, sure.
Technology, that's fine.
We good?
Okay.
Okay, thank you. So it's basically a sea of dilapidated and decaying pavement out there. Additionally, it's been a dumping ground. In fact, that's the reason that fence is now up there, because after the buildings got raised, people were going back there and dumping trash and tires and bulk. And if you go back on the northern and the western slopes, you'll see some of the garbage that's back there. Of course, that's all going to get removed as a part of this project. A little bit about the stormwater under current conditions, because I'm going to talk about what we're proposing, but everything slopes basically from the south to the north. The road is the high point, and the majority of the stormwater sheet flows across this pavement untreated to a low point on the northwestern part of the property up there, where it makes its way through the woods in a channelized fashion and has carved out a drainage ditch, if you will, that's eroding and going down into a drainage ditch adjacent to railroads. So it's very poor conditions right now. Additionally, there are some environmental conditions out there, which Attorney Hollister mentioned, and which he'll be speaking about a little bit later. But as a part of this project, those will be cleaned up to the satisfaction of DEP. If we can go to slide 4, please. Actually, go to slide 5. This is similar to slide 4. So this shows we've overlaid the proposed layout of our buildings and our parking and drive aisles and the whole site really over what was already there. And you can see that we are going to be ripping up all that pavement. We're going to be providing less impervious area, about 0.8 acres less impervious area. And we're placing the first building on the left you see is in the general location of the former dealership. You can see it's in about that same location. The building at the top is in generally the same location as the accessory building to that dealership was up there. And then the third building is going to be carved a little bit into the slope on the right-hand side. Let's go to slide 17, please. Just want to briefly touch on this. This was a part of the application package. This is an in-depth analysis that we did for all the larger vehicles that would have to get in and turn in and around the site, a box truck, garbage truck, and the largest fire truck in town. So we ran the templates to make sure that all these trucks could make it in from Cedar Street, throughout, around, and back out. This has been reviewed by the fire marshal. He has a very minor comment for us to widen a couple of curve radii. No big deal, we're going to do that, but just want to bring your attention that this has been reviewed by the fire marshal. We're going to be accommodating any emergency vehicles that would have a need to come to this site. Go to slide 7, please. So just a brief description of the site. Of course, we're entering with our curb cut on Cedar Street. It's the existing curb cut that is there right now. We're coming in with somewhat of a boulevard. We have one lane coming in. We have 2 lanes coming out. The right-hand lane coming out would be the right turn only. So we have a right turn only and a left turn only. That's been performed in conjunction with our traffic engineer, Mr. Ullman, who will speak in a little bit. You can see where we've laid out the parking and the buildings, obviously. There's a clubhouse on the right-hand side as you come in past that first parking lot. The clubhouse is going to be available to the residents. There's going to be a playground right wrapping around that clubhouse that the children will be able to use. You can see in the middle of the 3 buildings, there's going to be a town green with some walking paths, some landscaping, some benches, a patio area. Up on the most northern part, and I'll get into this when I talk about the stormwater, but we have a rain garden back there that is not only going to help with the stormwater, it's also going to be used as an aesthetic feature. We're going to have a paved walkway going around it, also for use by the residents. You can see, well, it's probably hard to see, but in the upper right, at the end of that parking area is where we're going to have our dumpster. Originally, we had it located on the left-hand side, but we have put it up on the right-hand side as a part of our permitting through the Inland Wetlands Commission. As far as the amount of parking, we're providing 1.4 spaces per unit. What Dakota has found with their many projects and what the Institute of Traffic Engineers also recommends for this type of development is between 1.2 and 1.3 spaces per unit. We're providing 1.4 spaces per unit. We think it's a little more than they're probably going to need, but we'd rather have a little bit more than a little bit less. So we're very comfortable with the amount of parking spaces that we're showing. Of course, we're providing the required handicap spaces, both van accessible and regular handicap accessible spaces that are required by the Connecticut Building Code and by the ADA regulations. Slide 18, please. As a part of our permitting with the Inland Wetlands Commission, you can see on the western side of the site, it's shaded out. We're providing a 40-foot conservation easement. That basically means none of those trees can be touched either throughout construction or after construction. That was not required by the Inland Wetlands Commission, but they had asked us if we would do that, and we're happy to provide that. Slide 19, please. This is a grading and drainage plan, and it shows the contours, and the dark lines are mostly underground stormwater piping with catch basins and area drains, things of that nature. Essentially what we're doing here, your regulations, the LID manual of your regulations is very comprehensive. It goes beyond the DEP stormwater quality requirements. We've been in discussions with the town engineer. He's reviewing our plans. I had a preliminary discussion with him. I believe we've met all those requirements, but essentially what it requires is a couple of things that I'm going to touch on. The first is that wherever the flow is going right now, we had to look at what the peak flow is right now under several design storms, and we had to make sure that A, we are maintaining those same discharge points, and then B, we are not increasing the peak flow rate under these design storms, all the way up to the 100-year storm, which is absolute monsoon. And essentially that's what we're doing. As I mentioned before, currently there's no treatment of stormwater. It all runs right off all this pavement. It all goes to the west, channelized, eroding down the slope, untreated. What we're doing is we're capturing it all, and we're taking it to a couple locations. The largest location is up on the north side of that top building up there. We have a very large rain garden that's going to be planted with a wildflower conservation mix. So the stormwater is designed to come into that, at least for the first flush, which is what your regulations and DEP requires that is treated, the 1-inch storm, will all go into that rain garden, and it will percolate, and the water will be treated. What we're trying to treat is the particulates on the pavement that get contaminated from vehicle exhaust and things of that nature. So we're treating all the stormwater. Then as the larger storms come along, it overflows and goes to a level spreader. So instead of being discharged, channelized, where it's going to erode down the slope, we're discharging it across a 40-foot level spreader to ensure that it's going down the slope in a sheet flow fashion. Down in the southwestern corner, we're doing something similar, but there's much less stormwater going down the left-hand side. You can see that we're piping our stormwater into another rain garden over there, and the overflow for that rain garden is also a level spreader, similar to the one up top, that discharges via sheet flow down to the west side. So we're decreasing the flow, we're maintaining the watersheds, we're also treating the water as required by your regulations, and I believe beyond your regulations. So that's the stormwater. As far as the landscaping, we provided a landscape plan with our application. A few just general comments about our landscape plan. Our plantings are native and non-invasive. In the front entrance, we have somewhat of a boulevard, tree-lined boulevard. There's various textures and trees within the site and around the building to provide scale and lessen the visual effects of the buildings. We have foundation plantings that are simple, up to 3 feet high, evergreen bushes, and evergreen ground cover that are going to be going up to but not above the bottom of the windows. As I mentioned before, we have rain gardens that are providing peak flow detention, stormwater quality, and nice aesthetic value to the site. We have mixtures of evergreens, oaks, maples, flowering trees, and then as I'd mentioned, we also have a nice town green in the middle that we're calling. Regarding lighting, your regulations also require us to provide no uplighting, but require us to provide safe light levels in the parking lots. We've done that. The light poles that we're proposing are 14 feet high. They're LED. They're full cutoff. There's no spillage of light across the property lines, all of which are required by your regulations, all of which we are meeting. Regarding utilities, we have sanitary.
You could wrap it up, and then we're going to cover this in detail more in our site plan review. Okay?
Sure.
Thank you.
So we're in contact with the utility companies. We believe there's not going to be an issue there.
You'll
We
get
meet all the-
confirmation on the sewer, whether or not it can.
That's right. Capacity analysis with MDC, that's correct, as well as Connecticut Natural Gas. We have full erosion control plans, which I can speak to later, which I believe meet your requirements. And to finish up, we've received comments back from the fire marshal, 2 very minor comments, to add 1 more hydrant, which we're going to do, and then to tighten up radiuses a little bit, which we're going to do. We've received comments from Mr. Minor. Mainly they're comments that aren't going to require any changes to the plans, but just showing compliance with your regulations. We haven't received formal comments back from the town engineer, but I did meet with him, and he's done about 70% of his review, and the comments that he had given back to me were very minor in nature, so I don't see the engineering of this site being an issue. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Ullman. He can talk about the traffic.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good evening. My name is Steve Allman. I'm a professional engineer with Alfred Benish and Company of Glastonbury, Connecticut. Let me preface my discussion here with, you received a letter from me to Mr. Minor dated today that included the analyses of Alumni Road at Cedar Street. When I did the original traffic analysis, I just did the signalized intersections. As I was finalizing the report, I realized I needed to include alumni. I requested the counts to be done on alumni. They were not done in time to make the formal filing, but you have all that data now. My presentation here tonight will include alumni as well. So it's all one package, but you have all the data in 2 separate sets. In order to conduct the traffic study, we did turning movement counts at 5 intersections in the vicinity of the site. Cedar Street at Old Farm Drive, Maple Road, Cedar at Alumni, Cedar at the Site Drive, the private Drive across the street, signalized, Cedar at Finn Road, Route 9 off-ramp, and Cedar Street at Wells and Route 9 southbound on-ramp. In the vicinity of the site, as you know, Cedar Street is Connecticut Route 175. It's classified as an urban minor arterial in Newington. It's a 4-lane roadway, basically, with turning lanes provided at the major intersections. The Connecticut Fast Track Station is located off Finn Road, approximately 650 feet north of Cedar. It's about a 0.7 mile distance from our site. However, there are no sidewalks provided along Cedar Street in this area down towards that way. There are sidewalk on the north side of the new bridge over Amtrak and the bridge further down over the river, I believe. But that's the only sidewalk. Beyond that, there are no sidewalks provided along Cedar Street. The posted speed limit along Cedar varies. It's 35 miles an hour down by the university. You get past the university, it bumps up to 45 miles an hour until you get to about Maple Hill Road. Then it drops down to 40 miles an hour. The sight lines were measured from the site drive, the existing intersection, to Cedar Street at the signal. What we found was that the sight lines from our driveway were equal to 500 feet to the west and exceed 600 feet to the east. The 85th measured percentile speeds in the vicinity were 50 miles an hour eastbound and 40 miles an hour westbound. For 50 miles an hour, we need 555 feet. The sight line to the east meets and exceeds the required sight distance. The sight line to the west does not. It is only good for 45 miles an hour, the posted speed limit. What happened is when the bridge over Amtrak was reconstructed by DOT, they elevated the road surface over Amtrak to get proper clearance over the railroad. And in doing so, they then reduced the sight lines from the site drive, original Crest Motor site drive. When I did the sight line profile on the actual existing old profile before the bridge, it exceeded 600 feet to the west as well. I'll cover more about that later. I also reviewed the crash data for the last 3 years between January 1st, 2015 to December 31st, 2017, along Cedar Street in the vicinity of the site. Basically, the whole corridor we studied. 58% of those crashes were rear-end type crashes at the signalized intersections, which is what we expect on a highly traveled road such as Cedar Street. Review of all the crashes involved. There are no crash patterns that warrant geometric or signal changes at any of the intersections. To analyze the impact of the development, traffic impact, we use the ITE Trip Generation 10th Edition 2017. This document contains trip generation information for various land uses, including multifamily low-rise housing, multifamily mid-rise, multifamily high-rise. Low-rise is typically 1 and 2 story. Mid-rise is up to 3, maybe 4 stories, depending on the development. And high-rise is 3 to 10 or more. They have eliminated several of the housing types in the manual, and I misspoke. Low-rise is now, that's the old one. Low-rise is now up to 3, mid-rise is 3 to 10, and high-rise is above 10. We did the trip generation for 108 units. The anticipated average daily traffic is 776 vehicles. The AM peak volume will be 52 vehicles to the site. Entering the site will be 12 vehicles. Exiting would be 40. The PM peak would be 63 vehicles total, 40 entering and 23 exiting. The trip distribution, we assume with proximity to Route 9 that approximately 70% of the traffic will be towards the west, towards Route 9, 30% towards the east, towards Newington, Weathersfield. That equates to 8 vehicles entering and 28 vehicles exiting in the morning towards New Britain, and 4 vehicles entering and 12 vehicles exiting to the east in the morning. In the afternoon, it's 28 vehicles entering, 16 vehicles exiting towards New Britain, and 12 vehicles entering and 7 vehicles exiting towards the east. We then did capacity analyses on the 2019 no build and 2019 build volumes. No build volumes are the volumes that are to be anticipated before the development is opened in the design year. I checked with both Mr. Minor and New Britain. There are no large developments proposed in the general area that will add a significant amount of traffic to Cedar Street. So the existing volumes were expanded by 2% to come up with the no build volumes. And then the 2019 build volumes, I just added the generated trips onto the roadway network. The analyses show that with the exception of Old Farm Drive, Maple Hill, and Finn Road, everything operates at level service C or better throughout the day, both for the 2019 no build, 2019 build. Old Farm at Maple Hill operates at level service E during the morning peak, and Finn Road would be at an level service E during the afternoon peak. None of the intersections, with the exception of the side drive, change in level of service between the two, no build and the build. The site drive goes to level service C during both peak periods with the build volumes. To address the sightline issue, our site drive is signalized. However, presently it goes flash overnight, and right turn on red is allowed from both sides. To prevent issues with the sightline limitation now that has been imposed on this intersection by the reconstruction of the bridge, we're proposing that the signal be kept cyclic, red, yellow, green, 24 hours a day, and that no turn on red be posted for both our site driveway and the commercial development to the south of the road. Just to let you know, that needs to be approved by the OSTA. This development will be reviewed by the OSTA because it exceeds 100 dwelling units. They will make the final determination whether or not what any changes are to the signal. The signal does accommodate pedestrians to cross Cedar Street. You push a button, you get a green light for the side street to go across. Based on the findings of our report, we found that the construction of Cedar Point will not adversely affect traffic operations within the area. Traffic will operate safely with proposed improvements. And I'll turn it over to.
Some respect.
Thank you all. Jesse Thompson, Kaplan Thompson Architects. I'm from Portland, Maine. I'm a little bit away, but my wife grew up in Barkhampstead, so I'm close to here.
Excuse me, we're getting things on the record here, and I will need everybody to please keep your comments to yourself. And everybody will have an opportunity to come up here and speak. So public, please be patient. Please continue.
Thank you, sir. We're very excited to be here, and we love working on this. Housing like this is really a sort of wonderful thing for a community to have the people who work in your town be able to afford to stay there. And a client like Dakota, who builds really high-quality buildings, is a pleasure to work for. Go to slide 24, please. So when we first saw this site has had a bit of a hard last few years. It's a big sea of parking lot. It's not a place a lot of folks would want to be. So what we really started staring at was how do we make this a wonderful place for all the neighbors who will live here. And what we looked at is we looked at the traditional New England town green, and we went to the way that most of our villages grew with a center green space and homes built around that. And so that was the basis for our design: is how do we make a place that's not a wonderful place to be into a wonderful place to be for the new neighbors who will be here. And so this image here is from the town green, looking back at two of the buildings, and we've We've also drawn on traditional New England forms like we're proposing clapboards, corner boards, asphalt shingles, traditional ways of building wood frame buildings. And so this image is probably our best look at what it would feel like to be here. Next slide, please. The buildings are typically similar. We've done some different colors and accents so you'll know which is yours and when you're coming home. But you can see we've got a gable roof, shed roofs behind, trying to make sort of fairly calm and quiet buildings and just a nice place to live. For the next plan. You'll come home through a center lobby where you can wait for your friends, pick up your mail, and you can see we've got a mix of the dark green are 2-bedroom apartments and the light green are 1-bedroom apartments. And we try to make sure that at the end of every quarter there's windows so you can see out into the landscape that's going to be fixed up, but that you'll be surrounded by green space and it'll be a sort of a nice place to live, and it'll be an affordable place to live. You'll be able to work in town and hold a job and know you're safe in your apartment. But the purple is the lobby and then the white are the corridors. The layout's the same on the upper levels. Next slide, please. It's really just trying to keep this building that we can be affordable to build as well. That's how we're going to make it affordable to live in. So it's everyone's got windows. All the bedrooms have windows. There's one bathroom for each. It's got full fire sprinklers, and it'll be a modern, very safe building. Next slide, please. There's a clubhouse. The clubhouse is a much, it's a little one-story building. And next slide. There is a community room. So neighborhood meetings can be held here. People can have birthday parties here. They can, all the functions that you'd have. It's got a little kitchenette in it. And there's a fitness center, a small gym, 2 bathrooms, and then there's a series of offices where if you're coming to rent an apartment, you'll come meet with staff there. They'll assess your qualifications and look over your lease up. And then there's a small maintenance room to the top left where the maintenance staff will store their equipment to take care of the place. And then one more slide, please. One thing we're very excited is that Connecticut has asked people to really advance the quality of the buildings they're building, and Dakota is very interested as well. They're giving extra points for substantial sustainability efforts and especially energy efficiency. And so this building is pledged to be a passive house, which is sort of a funny name, but it's came over from Germany. But it is trying to be the most energy efficient building, basically, that anyone knows how to build in the world, which is buildings have a lot of stuff in them. They've got refrigerators, they've got stove, they've got people living in them. If that's enough to heat the building most of the year, if you're insulated well enough, then you can have a substantially lower bills and have a nice, warm, safe home to live. And so this is just a diagram of some of the techniques we're using. Things like making sure every apartment has fresh air, that there's fresh air being brought into everyone's bedrooms all winter long when the windows are all shut. And in the summer, the windows are open. It'd be nice. And then last slide. I think this is the reason Connecticut's asking people to do this is the path of how we get off fossil fuels and we get ourselves to a sort of better future where we can drop our bills by 60% and substantially reduce it. You can see your average apartment building is over on the left. This building on orange is all the way over to the right. Is how just the high quality we're trying for, and really this is a building that really wants to last 100 years and be a substantial asset to the town. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, just to finish up our initial presentation, let me just say a few words about the soil remediation. As I mentioned, when Crest Motors went out of business, they left behind, as many auto service stations have done, some soil that's contaminated with petroleum products. The good news is that they, under the supervision of the Connecticut DEP, Crest Motors and then Stop and Shop have been working for over a decade to clean up the site. The good news, in quotes, is that it's confirmed that the areas where the soils need remediation are localized. Again, it's petroleum products, so nothing out of the ordinary in terms of soils, and it's not migrating off-site. If it were, it would be a much more serious situation. But the process is DEP supervised, and they're nearing the end. So what there was at Dakota's request, there was a final round of confirming sampling last week. We expect to get a final remedial report next week. We'll be presenting that to wetlands on the 21st, and when we come back to you on the 22nd of August, we hope to have a so-called final answer that we can wrap that up to the satisfaction of the commission and town staff. So with that, Mr. Chairman, that's our initial presentation. I thank you for your patience. We tried to strike the balance between getting the key details and not going overboard with boring detail, but I think we've given you the basics, and so I will yield the floor to the public. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And as you know, and everybody knows, we will leave this open. You've given the commission quite a bit of information to read and everything, so we have some homework to do. I'll turn it over to commissioners if they have any questions. Commissioner?
I have a question. Is this your first passive house design for the group, or are there others in the portfolio?
We've been assisting with a passive house project in New Britain, and we've done several actually up in Maine. So we've done several, a bigger one than this, and yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner.
Quick question on the traffic counts that you did. Did you take into account the proposed railroad station on the other side of the highway that's going in there?
That is not taken into account.
Okay.
We don't know when it's going to happen. We don't know that it's certain it won't happen before this development is opened. For certain, if it does happen. There have been several stations in Connecticut that have been proposed and not built, so no, we did not account for it at this point.
I would like to see you take that into consideration when you do this. Okay. My other question is, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
My second question is, the traffic light, who owns it? Who owns that traffic signal, do you know?
State of Connecticut.
You're positive?
Positive.
Okay.
And they are working on a project right now to upgrade the signals along Cedar Street, and that's one of them they will be doing sometime in the early 20s.
All right. And what about turning lanes on Cedar Street?
It's not warranted for our site. We don't have enough volume to warrant a turning lane.
But again, if we put the railroad station in play, will that?
I will check that. I'll take a look at that.
I think that's about it for now.
Yeah. Commissioner Claffey.
I had a few questions on the how you calculated the children's count on the school district.
Yeah.
Guys, have some respect, please.
Please.
That's one of my questions. How did you come about to calculate 108 units, or 108 units to be 180 to 190? I knew how you did that, but is there a state guideline, a federal guideline?
Now, what the planning community in Connecticut and elsewhere uses is what's called the Rutgers study from 2006, which is the best data that we have, where it was actually a survey statewide that went unit by unit, and what's especially helpful about it is it separates single family from multifamily, number of units in multifamily, and rent levels. Okay. And it's very much, I think the rent levels are like over $1,300 a month, 800 to 13, and below 800, and it gives you in 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, 4 bedroom, the actual number of school-age children in those types across the state of Connecticut. What the data generally find, which isn't too surprising, is 1 bedrooms, it's very rare to have a school-age child, which makes sense. 2 bedroom, you have some. 3 bedroom, that's where the number jumps exponentially. Oftentimes at least one, sometimes 1.4, 1.5 average children. So what we did, and I did my own calculation and Dakota did their own, and actually we pretty much came up with the same thing. Now, the one thing to remember very important is, so just to finish the calculation. So what we did was we took the Rutgers data and applied it to the rent levels and the type of apartment it proposed here and came out to 32 school-aged children. Now, it's not given that every one of those would attend a public school, but we made the assumption that every one of them would. Now, you also, Dakota, based on its experience, calculated 32 school-age children, but their experience is that when they develop communities like this, what they're trying to do, it's workforce housing. It's for a lot of their tenants are people who live in the community but are struggling to make ends meet. So they move within the community. So their estimate is if there are 32 here, based on the records data, about half of them would be relocations within the town of Newington and therefore not new to the school system. The last piece is, and I verified this today, Newington, like most towns in Connecticut, not all, but most, has seen a pretty substantial decline in its public school population. I believe from 2007 or 2008 to the present, decline from 4,600 students in the total system to just over 4,000. It's about an 11% decline. So if we apply that, I'm not going to take credit for that, but if you apply that reduction factor, it goes from 32 to about 27, 28. So that's the range. That's how we did it. Roberto, do you have
All set? Or did you have something else?
I had just two other questions. I live in a community with 94 units, and we have about 5 dumpster sites
Right.
for the residents. Here, I see 1 dumpster site, and it's at the farthest point.
Right.
Just, site logistics, that's number one. And number two, we talked about the fire truck access, and I know they looked at the turning radius and
Right.
ladder reach. But have you looked at the ability for that truck to fully pull to the building and stay on ground without sinking?
Okay. Mr.
So those are the dumpster and
Yeah, well,
the fire truck.
I will say the dumpster relocation was at the direction of the Wetlands Commission. They did not want it. Go ahead.
Okay. So first I'll talk about the dumpsters. So the model that Dakota has used, and they found that there tends to be a lot less garbage that's strewn on the site when there's less dumpsters and there's more frequent pickup times.
Okay.
So that's their rationale. That's just what they found with their many projects. So for the second question, can you clarify what you meant about sinking? I didn't.
There's I've been involved with a lot of these developments, not in this state, but in another state. And the requirement was all 3 of these units only have front access. They have no rear access, there's no rear entry or anything like that. So in the case of a fire, and I'm speaking of what I've learned, not from what the fire marshal says, there's always been compaction so that truck, the heaviest tonnage, can pull up to that building to get the farthest reach.
Mm-hmm.
So if he always has to reach from the street because that's where the compaction ends, then you have typical, I'm assuming no because of the way the site will be built, but has that been considered? I'm assuming it has with our town, but I'm just thinking because some of these buildings, you got some distances to try to get to the back of the building. 3 and 2 is kind of non-existent, or excuse me, 1 and 2. The third, which abuts the Dunkin' Donuts, you could get from the lot on the other side. So it might mean nothing in this community, but I'm just thinking,
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Regarding the location that the trucks can pull up to, the fire marshal is satisfied with what we're providing and the turning movements and all that. Regarding the stability of the roadway, as we enter into construction documents, we will have on board a geotechnical assessment who will, give us some guidelines, and we're going to make sure that we have a nice solid, a nice compacted base, and then we're going to have, I'm guessing, 8 to 10 inches of granular fill with another 4 or 5 inches of process aggregate, and then 2.5, 3 inches of pavement based upon their recommendations. But yeah, we'll make sure it won't sink.
Okay.
I'm set.
Commission-
Thank you.
You're welcome. Commissioner Fox.
Thank you, Chairman. As far as the fire apparatus is concerned, I have to agree with Commissioner Claffey, having driven fire apparatus, including truck and having myself, unfortunately, get stuck. I think that's very important, and I'm sure our fire marshal has done a good job, but I'm wondering if we can actually get a report.
We'll get a report from the fire, from the planner, we'll get a report from our fire marshal, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
And the other thing is the dumpster that's way out there, one dumpster. Is that divided into recyclables and trash?
Correct.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, if there's no other questions from commissioners, the town planner, do you have anything you have to add? No. Okay, we're going to open this up for public participation. And I'm going to ask Clark to come up first, and then we're going to read names from a list. I'll have the secretary read the names, and then if we don't read your name and you still like to come up and speak, you'll have an opportunity to come up and speak. Please proceed. State your name and address for the record, please.
Clark Castell, 167 Connecticut Avenue. Thank you, Chairman Payne. I felt compelled to come out and speak early this evening because I've been concerned with some of the comments regarding this petition that I've been reading on social media, many of them too mean-spirited and inflammatory and factually incorrect to be repeated here without my embarrassing myself and the whole town in an even more public way. What I found strange about these posts was that I could find almost no sympathy among group members for the problem of affordable housing at the national or state or local levels, no recognition that solving it is a priority of both federal and state governments, and no notion that a majority of Newington residents share these concerns and may wish to be a part of the solution. So I'd like to convey to Dakota Partners my thanks for the important work that they are doing in our state and for choosing Newington as a place to build decent and affordable housing for deserving moderate income people whom my wife and I look forward to welcoming to our community. Now, of course, nothing that is worth doing is going to be free of problems. Those along the entire stretch of Cedar Street will have to be addressed one day. And we know that there are more in the future, more development in the future. But including those problems, the most ironic of all, having too much traffic during some hours of the day and then having too little traffic during the rest when drivers feel free to race from one end of town to another. The problems are more than I can enumerate. Then there's Anna Reynolds School, which its student body has nearly outgrown. I understand that. In this case, however, it's important to remember that the school system as a whole is underpopulated, having nearly 500 fewer students than it did 15 years ago. That's like taking an entire middle school worth of students and removing them. Also, that the number of school-age students that typically live in developments, and I'm going to get gales of laughter from the gallery back there, that typically live in developments like these are well under 1/2 per unit. And I had written here a figure that Dakota Partners would surely be able to verify. In fact, I've heard it's as low as 0.39. That Rutgers study might be something that we all need to look at. In any case, none of these are problems, in my opinion, that people of goodwill shouldn't be able to resolve. I do have one request, however. I look at Dakota Partners' portfolio of developments, and I can't help noticing that nearly all of them seem to be a little more attractive from an architectural point of view than the one that is planned for Newington. So I hope that Dakota Partners would be willing to work with the town to consider some modifications that might be better not only for Newington, but also for their future tenants and for Dakota Partners as an enterprise. I must say, though, that when I saw the presentation, and it's particularly the aerial view, it looked better than I had recalled from the original artist rendering. I have lots of ideas there, but I'm running out of time and would be happy to give them to you at another opportunity. Chairman Payne, thank you very much.
Thank you. Could I have the secretary read the first name on the list, please? Hold on 1 second. What's that, Noreen?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sandy Austin Goldstein.
Sandy Austin Goldstein, 84 Moreland Avenue. I respectfully ask for a little leeway with time. I have a lot of ground to cover. I do have a folder with me of supporting documents. I go to work through Cedar Street. I wondered how proposed housing might impact my commute. I decided to Google the address, which led me to concerns far greater than traffic. 550 Cedar Street is on the state DEEP's current list of contaminated or potentially contaminated sites dated June 2018 and is considered a hazardous waste facility as defined by Connecticut General Statute. DEEP's most recent public file states that for more than 30 years, from the late 60s until 2000 when it was sold, the property was a 30,000 square foot auto dealership with service garage and 18 bays, 6,700 square foot auto body shop, and had 5 underground oil storage tanks, USTs. But when the dealership closed, hazardous waste remained for 10 years. 1,200 gallons of waste oils and wastewater, over 2,000 pounds of paint, and corrosive liquids like battery acid were finally removed by an environmental cleanup company in 2010. The report indicates that 55 Cedar has been through rounds of investigation and remediation through multiple phases without success over decades. Case in point, the underground storage tanks mentioned earlier were removed in 1988 as part of Catalyst Phase 1 ESA, but the story does not end there. Phase 2 investigation to this area in 2000 indicates that TPH, total petroleum hydrocarbon concentrations, exceeded the levels the state allows for residential land use. Remediation in 2001 did not change that. Post-remediation results showed TPH and extractable petroleum hydrocarbons, ETPH levels, exceeding residential land use limits. Same area, 9 years later, 2010, investigation showed TPH numbers at more than 8 times what is allowable for residential land use and more than 165% of the industrial commercial limit. The report states, based upon analytical results to date, soil remediation and or the implementation of an ELUR, environmental land use restriction, to restrict the site to industrial commercial use is warranted for this AOC area of concern. The underground storage tank area was just one of 33 areas of concern located throughout the property as identified by engineers. Multiple AOCs have shown ongoing issues with soil samples showing high levels of lead, petroleum, and ETPH exceeding the residential standards, and groundwater being classified by DEEP as GB, generally indicative of areas of intense industrial activity. While nearly 1,900 tons of impacted soil were removed in 2001 from 6 demographic sections of the site, when the soil was retested 9 years later, it still exceeded remediation regulations in 3 of 6 areas. The buildings were demolished in 2012, according to licensed engineering professional assigned to this site, Robert Bristol. The last public file is from 2011, but the DEEP list indicates Phase 3 remediation began in July 2013, so I asked for any updates beyond what was available in the public file room. A supervisor in the DEEP remediation division told me that the last report on file was from December 2016, related to investigations completed in 2014. At that time, levels of ETPH, both in ground soil and groundwater, were still at a concentration exceeding the remediation standards. The TPH level at the UST site had remained exactly the same, 8 times the residential standard. No further remediations have been conducted since then, and no investigations since then until the last few months, the LEP said. His employer, Geo Insight, now has about 90% of the lab data, and he said that they will make a new remediation action plan available a few days before the next inland wetlands meeting, August 21st. I ask that the TPZ press the pause button on this project. Please do not make a decision regarding the zoning until the report from Geo Insight is completed and available to the public, and you have reviewed all environmental data completely and independently. Measure twice and cut once, as we hold people's lives in our hands. We must exercise due diligence because the potential impact to the people who would live at this property in our town is far too great not to.
Thank you. Anybody else, anybody wishing to speak in favor of this application?
Can I leave this
Leave
with the
the list alone.
secretary?
Excuse me, anybody?
I'm on the list.
Yes, please come forward. Give me the list.
My name is Kathy Flaherty. I live at 139 Cedar Ridge Road. I have lived in Newington my entire life, except when I left to go to school. I am a legal aid lawyer. I know very clearly the need for affordable housing in Connecticut, especially workforce housing, for people to be able to live in the communities of their choice in decent, safe, and affordable housing. Now, I'll be honest, I am not an environmental expert. What I am is a concerned citizen and a person who works with people of low income all the time. I also do a lot of work in terms of the Reaching Home Coalition. I have several of their handouts, which I'm sure were probably part of the package that was submitted to you. What I would like to see is this town planning and zoning commission follow the law. 830G is the law of the state. There were proposals to change it that did not make it through the legislature, which means this town is obligated to follow the statute. There are reasons, and very limited reasons, with very clear reasons in the statute for you to be able to deny the application. Seeing Attorney Hollister nodding, I think if there are environmental concerns that are a significant risk to public health and safety, those need to be addressed. And I have no doubt that Dakota would want to address them, because the whole point of this is for people to live in decent, safe, and affordable housing. And I would really like to see the town I live in welcome something like that, rather than constantly saying no to so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak in favor? Or have a comment? Speak in favor, have a comment? Please come forward.
I have a comment.
You have to come to the mic and state your name and address for the record, please. Okay.
My name is Harriet Roman. I live at 176 Schoolhouse Road in Newington, and I haven't made a decision whether I'm for or against this. I'm looking at both sides. My concern is the traffic. If I understand correctly, from what this gentleman told me about where the traffic is going to be going, you know, whether it's 16 more cars or 40 more cars, most of it was going west, I think. But if these are people that are working in our community, when they come out of this development, which is on our border, they're going to be going east. Am I right in my directions? I'm not. To me, they're going to be going left out of the complex, right? Which is going to bring all that traffic down that end. I grew up on East Cedar Street when it was a two-lane 175, and now it's a 4-lane 175. My sister, who is sitting behind me, got hit waiting to turn into her driveway because a car did not stop. She was stopped. She was trying to go left. And it's awfully hard to go in and out of those driveways on Cedar Street now. You add all this traffic, and I'm sorry that I have to disagree with these gentlemen about which way this traffic is going to go. But if the majority of these people are working in our town and they want to live in our town, they're not going to be going away from the center of town. They are going to be going right down Cedar Street, all the way. And I think that that's a big concern. At least for me, it would be the traffic on that street.
Thank you.
Okay.
Anybody else like to speak in favor of this application? Anybody else like to speak in favor? Rose, you coming up? Do you have?
You don't have to be on the list, believe me.
Rose Lyons, 46 Elton Drive, and I'm not on the list, and I wasn't going to speak, but I guess you're used to me speaking, so I might as well say something. First of all, trust but verify. I'd like to know, I'd like to see how the 8% was arrived at as far as what we have for affordable housing here in Newington. I asked for some figures. They seem to be old ones. I wasn't able to find anything anywhere. So I'm hoping that you also have asked for an up-to-date list. The traffic study, I've seen different things, heard different things. Is there just the applicant's traffic study that you're going to look at? Or are you going to get an independent one?
No, just the applicants.
Just the applicants. Okay. So I guess I'll leave you with, you know what you're doing. You're sitting here looking out for the best interest of the Newington residents. Trust but verify. I've seen too many applicants come before you and give information that I never saw any backup for, but then again, I can't say that I've looked at every single application, but I know that when Amara was here, they used the Newington Housing Needs Study as one of their presentations, and one of their presentations stating that we needed that type of housing. That Newington Housing Study needs was done by a town councilor with the help from kids from CCSU, and to me, it wasn't something that should have been used, but that's only my opinion as a resident. Once again, trust but verify. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Rose. Anybody else wishing to speak in favor of this application? If there's nobody else wishing to speak in favor, anybody wishing to speak in opposition of this application, you're limited to 3 minutes. Please come forward.
I'm closest.
We're not going by the list. I'm calling people. If you want to come up and speak, you're welcome to come up and speak. Please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is Sandra Charlin. I live on Robin Brook Drive. I'm not in favor of this project for the lovely town of Newington, where I've lived most of my life. Unfortunately, I do not see any enhancement for our town if this project goes forward, other than ridership for Fast Track. Negatively, it will create traffic and safety issues, probably higher taxes for school needs, aesthetics, police, et cetera, not to mention building residences on wetlands. My concerns, this land was on the polluted list, and I would like to see proof that test well has been done on all 7.7 acres. If it is brownfield, it is not suitable for permanent housing, and chemistry tests would need to be done even on them. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak? Please come forward.
Dana Havens, 113 Stoddard Avenue. I almost came up when you said people who are in favor of it to come up, because I'm not fully against it yet. I just don't think, well, yeah. Today's turning me a bit, because I don't think we're getting the information we need, and I also questioning the information we're getting. And some of the questions I had were, we already found out that they didn't take into account the train station, but also we need to take into account the development that's going in at the old National Welding, because there is somebody who is interested and has a plan set for that. So I'm guessing that wasn't taken into account when you're talking about the traffic study. Also, the amount of children, I'm sorry for all the snickering back there, but it really does sound very, very low. Even if you just go to some of the other developments that are geared towards low income, there's definitely more kids than that. And then you said half will be from town, and I'm just wondering, well, I guess you kind of explained that, but I was also wondering if you're thinking of the families that are housed temporarily on the Berlin Turnpike. Also, they had said that property taxes, that we would actually be getting some of those property taxes, but once Dakota sells it, and if it gets sold to a nonprofit who would be running it, would we still be getting property taxes off of that? And I also noticed a lot of parking spaces way in the front, away from the buildings, and I was wondering why it was there. Kind of made me, before you said you didn't think of the train station, I thought maybe you were thinking of the train station. And I'm assuming that people will use it for the train station, and then we need to take into account all those people walking across back and forth from the train station to that site. And I think that's all the notes I have.
Thank you, Dana.
Thanks.
Anybody else?
Yeah, my name is Henry Charland, 18 Robin Brook Drive. Yeah, I'm just going to speak kind of extemporaneously. Number one, I just heard the Utopia building that's going to be in our fine city. I can't wait to move in, and I'm sure that everybody else wants to move into this project also. Now, I think this is also the type of presentation that was given to the city of Hartford probably 65 years ago in reference to putting in high density, low-cost housing, which equates to what I would call projects, which are now being knocked down in the city because of the crime rate and all the problems that those high-density populated areas cause the city. Where you're basically being asked to okay a building that is going to be put on property that there's applications. It's a wetland, it's been polluted, and it's in a high-traffic area. I don't know how anybody else drives around here, but boy, I want to tell you, you try to come out of Dunkin' Donuts, forget it, at 4 o'clock, you're there till 6:30. And there's no way that anybody can convince a citizen of this town that there's not going to be a traffic problem over there. The people in this town have been down that road enough times, either Fenn or Cedar Street, to know that this is a hazardous area to try and exit. There can be no further lights put out there. From what I understand, the Department of Transportation has already done a study on that, having to do with old farms and trying to come up with a plan where they could change the configuration of the old farms and Indian Hill intersection. And they cannot add any other lights because there's no way that the traffic would be able to move. You'd have everything plugged up in that area.
All set?
And I think that I have one other thing I wanted to bring up. I'm not so sure that this building is being put up for any beneficial reasoning. I think that the building is being put up to be in compliance with the fast track. The fast track project, not only was the fast track built, incorporated in that project is housing. There has to be a certain amount of housing to comply with the contract. The state has money that they're holding. However, in order to comply with the federal contract, they have to have housing. And I'm just wondering if this is being stuffed down your throat and our throat because we have a fast track, which is going to cost us money right off the top. As soon as those people walk away, we're going to be supplementing that like we're doing the bus company already. Now, to add housing to the equation is just going to cost you more money. I would rather spend my tax dollars fighting the state and saying, hey, your problem. You didn't set up the housing thing correctly to begin with. Now don't come and tell us that we're the bad guys because we don't have a certain percentage of affordable housing in this town. Because we're way above. There's 130 towns that have less affordable housing than Newington. Now, is there any reason there? And there's other places in this town that would be more appropriate for putting this type of a development. That area is not ideal. The only reason that area is being considered is because of that fast track, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you very much.
Now, maybe I'm wrong.
Gail Bedraco, 21 Isabel Terrace. I'm not speaking for or against this application, but I have several reservations. A very dense housing project is being proposed for this site, a site which at first glance doesn't seem suited for any type of residential development. TPZ's charged with ensuring the site is suitable as it concerns safety and health issues, so I'm asking that the following be considered before you make any decision on this application. Now, on a daily basis, residents of this development will have to deal with traffic issues on Cedar Street. TPZ is aware of the hazardous conditions in the area and referenced them often during discussions on Alumni Road. Parking's planned for more than 140 cars, and these cars will be navigating entry and exit all day long. Additionally, there'll be multiple school buses arriving at peak commute hours to transport the children to the Newington schools. So the traffic may not severely or adversely increase the current situation, but you've got to note that the current situation is horrendous and extremely dangerous. To increase the use of public transport, it's been a goal to create housing near the busway. And affordable housing will have a mix of residents, including children, the elderly, and perhaps those with disabilities, individuals who would presumably use and rely on public transportation. However, the problem is there's no safe way to get to Connecticut Fast Track since there are no sidewalks. In fact, there's going to be no way for these people who must rely on transportation to go to Newington Center or the Town Hall or other places safely, since Cedar Street itself does not have adequate sidewalks. So residents without transportation will be at risk as they'll be walking along one of the busiest roads in Newington, and this is a very real concern. The site itself sits on an embankment surrounded by wetlands, and the slope levels out to a high-speed rail line with frequent commuter service. These apartments will have children. I suspect, perhaps 32 school age, but there's going to be an awful lot of toddlers and babies as well. Kids will be kids. Kids are eager to explore, kids are eager to play, and kids are reckless. I'd like to know what safeguards are going to be planned to ensure there are no tragedies as a result of this proximity to the rail line. The environmental concerns were previously mentioned, but I want to make sure that they're addressed since there was substantial contamination identified at the site. Remediation began in 1988 with the removal of 5 underground storage tanks, but as recently as June 2018, 550 Cedar is still listed on DEEP's list of contaminated or potentially contaminated sites. The last DEEP report available to the public, dated 2011, identified more than 28 areas of concern, which included high concentrations of petroleum, hydrocarbons, and soils with high levels of lead and petroleum. It even identified some areas as suitable only for industrial or commercial use unless they are fully remediated. Now, I know remediation is underway, but I think it's important to get documentation that all areas of concern have been or will be remediated. And if construction activities that will create soil disturbances could produce additional hazardous conditions or contaminated water runoff. This is going to be important because there'll be children playing on the grounds in the town green and in planned play areas. So right now, I think it's premature to do any zone change to residential for this site until the extent of the environmental hazards and remediation has been vetted. Additionally, I'm urging you as a body to do a site visit at peak commute hours to observe traffic, to observe pedestrian access, and observe the slope and proximity to the rail line. Only then will we be able to make an informed decision on whether they're real or perceived safety concerns. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Jeff Solik, 55 Wells Drive North, Newington. I believe at the beginning of the public hearing, Attorney Hollister requested that petition 24-18 and 25-18, these are items A and B under public hearing, be simultaneously held. Those items are supposed to be speaking to the text amendment and to the map. I've not seen the text amendment and I've not seen the map. What I did see for the last 2 hours is a site plan presentation, which is under new business as item B. In my opinion, you just conducted an illegal public hearing for the site plan, and I think you should summarily dismiss all of this. Thank you.
Yeah. Maureen, if you could hold off for 1 second, please. I got to wonder if you should have even come up to speak, since you're the chairman of the Conservation Commission. You probably should have held your remarks to yourself. And I gave, excuse me, no, you can't speak from there. You cannot speak from there. Sit down, please. Now, everybody, please keep your comments to yourself. We're going to conduct an orderly meeting here. I gave Attorney Hollister the leeway to talk about some of the other things. I thought it would be helpful for the residents to get a clearer picture of the proposed application. Please proceed, Maureen. Thank you.
Maureen Clip, 104 Harold Drive. Before I start, I just would ask that your commissioners use their mics, because the back of the room, at least maybe my ears aren't as good as some of the younger folks, we could not hear what you even read in terms of what the requirement is. So could you please be aware that it's not being picked up by the mics? So to start, I really am sorry that some people feel that if you're opposed to this, that you don't embrace affordable housing. As a nurse who works with 7 different nursing homes across the state, I see every single day people that are looking for affordable housing, and a federal program called Money Follows the Person that's in place that helps people get affordable housing. Probably not fast enough, but it is in place. Dakota Partners, I believe the partners are from Massachusetts and New Hampshire. Attorney Hollister, I think, is from West Hartford. The town planner, Mr. Miner, who commutes here every day from Bristol, just like the busway that was forced upon us from people who live out of town, nothing has changed. You are appointed town TP&Z members, are our only hope to do what is right for the town of Newington. I remember the vice chairman, Mr. Payne, sitting on a panel with, I believe, Mr. Sobieski, when you were discussing what we could do to improve Cedar Street, and I believe, I'm quoting you very accurately, when the minutes could reflect that meeting, Mr. Payne, you said, it's a dangerous, dangerous road. You used the word dangerous twice. And you even mentioned that how one of our former police chiefs, not the one I'm married to, was involved in a significant accident. So I ask you, what has changed? The state numbers on Cedar Street and west of Old Farms for a period of time of May 1st through May 4th in a 24-hour period cites 32,520 cars traverse the street daily. And there's going to be no turn lane on this project, and people are going to be trying to pass over 2 lanes. I believe the developer's numbers may be different, and I would hope the commission will not just consider traffic numbers provided by someone trying to build 108 units of housing. In this town, we purchase, I understand it's got to be, you can only reject this based on a safety issue, and I think the lady that spoke first, I think you eloquently pointed out probably one of the areas that could be cited as a safety issue. I would like to request, let me say, we bought in this town, we paid over $1 million to purchase Eddy property and Young Farm. And part of the reason we did that, past council members, was because not just because they wanted to keep open space here, which is very limited, but also because they didn't want any more increase in, residential housing projects, which, probably would have been very high-end housing, and they still said, no, let's keep the property open. I would like to request, per the Freedom of Information request, and I'd be happy to put it in writing, any and all information as how the developers calculated their accident information, how it was compiled, because I remember as being a member of the town council when there was talk about what we were going to do with Garfield Street, and they gave us these numbers about accidents on Garfield Street, and they included car accidents that occurred in the middle of the Mill Pond. They didn't even, it was totally different when you looked at the end of Garfield Street by Main Street and the end over by Willard Avenue. So you can finesse numbers any way you want, and I would ask that that information be pinned. You can ask for our IT person to pin those numbers to show you if the numbers agree with what we're being told. As far as the one-bedroom apartment, not having school children, we have hotels on the Berlin Turnpike that are certainly not 2 bedrooms, and we have buses that are picking up the children. Now, I hope that those are if something is built, that the families living there have an opportunity to move from a hotel into an apartment. But to sit here and tell us that there won't be children in a 1-bedroom apartment when we already know we have school buses stopping on the Berlin Turnpike picking up children is just not accurate. I'd like to know how they're going to monitor the number of people that are living, they say 4 in a 2-bedroom. How's that going to be monitored? I'd like to really know, how is somebody going to really know whether there's 6 or 8 people? Lastly, regarding Connecticut General Statutes 8-30G and the 10% requirement, I strongly believe our elected officials, our council, need to reach out to our state officials because it isn't being enforced fairly to pass a law that says anybody can do what they want if you don't have 10%. Well, our almost former governor, he put a bid on a house in Essex. You know how much housing there, I'm assuming he got it, but you know how much affordable housing there is in Essex? 1.5%. And I would bet you that Mr. Dakota and his company wouldn't be looking to build in Essex. I would ask that you deny the zone based on a safety issue. I feel you yourself telling us it's a dangerous road when we were talking about what we were going to do. I don't know what more we need to do to convince people that there's accident hazard. This is going to skyrocket. If you allow this, I strongly encourage my fellow citizens to call for a charter revision for the purpose of changing the way you were all appointed by your respective political parties. Right now, your parties put your names up, and for the most part, everybody gets on this board or commission. You are the most powerful commission. Don't let the town council know. You are more powerful than the town council. And if you don't do the right thing for the town of Newington, then I would suggest that my fellow citizens join together, ask for a charter revision commission, and change the way our TPZ members are appointed, and let's elect people. So we can say, you're not doing a good job. See you later.
Anybody else? I just want to clarify, make it clear for the record that when Maureen Klett was talking about my take on Cedar Street, this commission was working on a plan for a traffic light for Alumni Road because we thought that it was a dangerous situation for the kids of the school to exit Alumni Road without a traffic light. And the counselors didn't agree with me, and they didn't take it up, and it is what it is, and it's a dangerous situation today, but it was a dangerous situation yesterday. And until the council does something on that, it's going to remain that way. Anybody else wishing to speak against this application? You're all set. No, we have other people. We have other people that haven't spoke yet. Please.
Can't go. One cop sit down here. My name is Rich Klett, 104 Harold Drive, Newington, Connecticut. I mean, a short time ago, I was on the committee when we were talking about the situation on Alumni Road and Cedar Street, light or no light. And in fact, one of our esteemed citizens, Gary Bowles, said this is so hazardous, he compared it to the World Trade Center. Okay, and that whole stretch, by the way, from my experience, is one of the worst in Newington. Not necessarily even Alumni Road is not the worst intersection, but that's stretch. I think you're going to get the numbers to do that. So the traffic guy here tonight did not really speak to the configuration of Cedar Street at the entrance to 550 Cedar Street. I'm concerned that there be no left-hand turn lane, because once the car stops to take the left-hand turn and he's in the passing lane going east, we have a lot of those situations which cause the accidents as cars begin to turn right to get in the other lane, and it's real crazy out there. I drive that street pretty much every day. So I'm concerned that we should be looking at a left-hand turn lane from the light, and they ought to widen the east side of Cedar Street as it goes in, so that you don't have to make a 90-degree turn and you're off the traffic. And I think they should be responsible to make those improvements. We've done that in the past with other developers. We should consider it. Now, one gentleman, Clark, mentioned earlier of the capacity of the schools. Well, you go back into the capacity of the schools in we'll say 1980. Yes, there was 2,000 kids in the high school. Today there's 1,200 or 1,300 kids in the high school. And basically, if you interpolate those figures, the same impact is true. Yes, there's not necessarily as many kids, but there's a lot more going on in the schools today than there were then. At the high school where I work, we're up to capacity in terms of space. And I think there's enough people here who go to the schools on a daily basis know that there's not an abundance of space in the school, especially when you got to add a classroom or a media center, for that matter. Like, for example, the two examples I'll give you at the schools are the STEM centers. The STEM, okay, that's taken a lot of room, but that's done a lot of good for the citizens. So I think you got to be mindful. Like my wife said, and I think I mentioned it to her, you're not a bad person because you're not in favor of affordable housing. Okay? Newington has spent a lot of money, over $3 million, as my wife said. I think I really told her. For the Young property and the Eddy property. So it's not against unaffordable housing, it's against housing in general on a massive scale. So it wasn't just open space for the Eddy property or the Young property, okay? It was to keep things in check within the town of Newington. Now, for those who are in favor, I don't want you to come back and start complaining about your taxes going up, because I almost think it's a dead heat. There's no revenue that will come from this complex. Because if you have 30 kids, there's $19,000 a year to send one child to school. Do your math. Not to mention the other ancillary services that may happen as time goes on. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak? Please come forward. Thank you.
My name is Jure Kulgis. I live on 6 Pebble Drive, and I just want to reiterate, all the concerns from us, the residents. My wife drives every day through Cedar Avenue, and I am a professional engineer. I pretty much have the same concerns. You have the environmental issues, but again, I just want to reiterate the traffic. Traffic is a big issue. Whatever you do with that signal light, it affects all of the other signal lights. They brought good points about, a future train station, the future traffic from a fast track. So I believe that we need more information about specifically traffic and about affordable housing. It is something that maybe the town of residents, want, but this is definitely the wrong location. So pretty much, definitely, there are a lot of issues. Safety, has there been a noise study on this location? It's next to a train station. And one other concern that has been brought many times is also about the children and the school bus. It's another headache, with the traffic. So I think you need to do a better study on traffic and the impact, on all levels, at these specific locations.
Thank you very much for your comments.
Thank you.
Anybody else wishing to speak in opposition?
So once again, Jeff Selleck, 55 Wells Drive North, and I want to state for the record, I was not speaking for or against the application. When I spoke, I was speaking to the procedures that were followed this evening. I wanted to point out to you that you made a procedural error with the public hearing. Thank you.
Anybody else wishing to speak in opposition? Please come forward.
That's all I got. My name's Sal Senna. I live at 180 Robbins Ave. I've been a resident of Newington now for the past 52 years. I grew up in this town. I raised my family in this town. And the thing I notice is that, yes, there are schools that are starting to lose a lot of their kids in there. There's not as many kids in there anymore. But then again, the same token, the people that raise these kids are the ones that are still left behind. They are the parents, they are the grandparents, such as myself. Now, my kids are all out of the house, and now they're raising their own kids, which means they are paying taxes in their prospective town. Whereas with the kids diminished as it is in our schools, I'm starting to get a little of a tax break for a change. Even though the state's not doing it, but, we're still getting a tax break. Now, the one thing that also bothers me is, as you stated, you try to put the light on Alumni Road. Well, you've got the VA coming out of there and quite a few other complexes in there. Today, they turned that light down. That does not mean they're going to turn it down a year or 2 years from now. They're going to have to put something in there because of that traffic flow, which means you're going to have a traffic light on Alumni Road. You already have one on Maple, and now we're going to possibly have to put another one in front of the Crest complex. You're talking about 3 traffic lights, all within 800 to 900 feet distance. There's no way. The traffic flow is going to be backed up all the way up and down Cedar Street from both sides. All right.
Thank you very much for your comments. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Anybody else wishing to speak in opposition? Anybody else wishing to speak in opposition?
Hi, good evening. My name is Janet Pizzuto. I live at 290 Old Farm. I had been to many of the traffic meetings for alumni, and I've been to many of the traffic meetings for alumni and Cedar. Our property is right abuts alumni, so we're the second house in, and I can attest to the nightmare of the traffic and the mindset of the people that drive on that road. And just coming out of my driveway, I've gotten in the habit of backing in, because backing out with people coming in and coming out, trying to make that light there at Old Farm and flying across Maple Hill. So I think it needs to be thought through more with the impact that it will have, and, for people not to feel shamed, to be concerned about their property and the effect it might have with the increased traffic, with the increased noise, with the increased capacity at, I guess, Anna Reynolds is already somewhat crowded. So if you could please consider the neighbors in that area, that would be, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak in opposition? Last call.
Yes, Frank Witkowski, 170 Old Farm Drive. I think a few years ago, we were here talking about all the realignment of Alumni Road and how bad the traffic was. We went over and over it, and we basically were disregarded on that whole deal. It threw it back to the state, and the state said, we don't have the money to do it, so it wasn't done. Now, I'm not against the housing, because I see many new residents in Newington all over town, but none of them are here. So my concern is the traffic. It's been that way for years. And now it was bad then. You want to redo everything, realign Old Farm and Alumni Road and disrupt all the families that currently live here. And that didn't go through. Now you want to add more housing, and it's okay. And it's going to increase the volume of traffic regardless. I just don't want us to be the puppet of the state, and I want you to speak for the town people that live here right now. And once you get green light, a project like this where there is environmental concerns, then that gives a green light for the state to open up everything else. We know business is going to come in there. That's going to come, and like the woman just said just before me, it's going to completely disrupt all the neighborhoods in the area and increase the traffic and make the property values in all areas, Maple Avenue, Old Farm Drive, the other Vincent Drive area. What's going to happen then? No, not just because of a public housing coming or workforce housing, but just from the traffic alone. Who's going to want to live there? And what's going to happen to the value of our homes? But we're still going to pay a boatload of taxes. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else wishing to speak? Anybody else wishing to speak? Remember, we are going to leave this open, so you'll have another opportunity at our next meeting. I'm going to give the Attorney Hollister an opportunity to rebut some of the questions. Or you can reserve your till next meeting.
I think we will. We've been taking notes. Certainly some questions need some.
Excuse me, we're still conducting a meeting here. I'm sorry. Please go.
We've been all taking notes. There's some questions that were raised that will come up with some additional information.
1950s. Sorry.
Okay, you can continue.
Some questions have been raised that require some additional information. We will endeavor to get that together and get it on file with Mr. Minor a couple days ahead of the next meeting, so everybody has a chance to look at it, but otherwise we'll reserve our comments to a later time.
Okay, very good. And since the applicant has reserved his rebuttal, the opposition doesn't have an opportunity to rebuttal. We are going to leave petition 24-18 and petition 25-18 open. And one other thing, if the town planner could request from the school department review of the plans for their buses to pull in there and a place to stop, just so that we get it on the record.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Yes.
Please. If they don't pull into Friendly Acres right now to pick up children on the Berlin Turnpike, I don't believe they're going to be able to pull in off of Cedar Street. That's a private road.
Okay, well.
That's what I'd like to have the planner find out from the school.
I'm sorry, would you say that again? What was your?
At the present time, I don't believe the school buses are allowed to pull in on private roads to pick up kids, such as Friendly Acres on Route 15. When they stop, everything stops. I believe the same thing is going to happen on Cedar Street.
Well, they pull in the.
Well, we'll get it straight from them. Commissioner Fox and then Commissioner Claffey.
No, just on on Stanley's topics, I have to agree with him. I live, as you know,
Well,
I live right near Churchill. They pick up, and Hopkins Village. They pick up right there on the street.
Well, we're going to get it straight from the staff, from the school.
Okay, thank
Commissioner Claffey.
I'll leave that for a future meeting.
Thank you very much. Okay, if the secretary could read the next petition, please, 2818.
Petition 28-18, zoning text amendment, section 6.16, medical marijuana, Seva Sedan LLC, applicant John M. Kelly, 66 Cedar Street, Newington, Connecticut, contact.
Attorney?
Good evening, Commissioners. How you doing tonight? Busy night. My name is John Kelly, and I am representing the applicant for first a zoning text amendment for your medical marijuana regulations. And we also have a special permit application for a medical marijuana dispensary to be located, proposed location at 2272 Berlin Turnpike in Newington. First of all, on the zoning text amendment, as this commission may be aware, in 2014, you established zoning regulations to allow medical marijuana dispensaries and medical marijuana production facilities. Production facilities are where they grow the marijuana for development into medical marijuana medicine. The dispensaries are pharmacy-like stores that dispense the medical marijuana once it has been, converted into medicinal form for use by the specific public that needs the medical marijuana benefits. Now, I say specific public because you have to avail yourself of medical marijuana. You have to have letters from your doctor. You have to get approval through the doctor has to certify through the regulations required by the Connecticut Department of Consumer Protection. And just kind of following up, that's how medical marijuana was allowed in Connecticut in the first place, back in 2012. After many, many years of debate, the legislature approved it, directed the Department of Consumer Protection to put in place stringent regulations. And I say stringent regulations because there's a lot of concern, obviously, that the medical marijuana only be available to those people with the certified medical conditions that a doctor has recognized medical marijuana will help. Things like neuropathy pain, glaucoma, movement disorders related to Parkinson's, cancer-related ailments that treatment generates nausea, things like side effects of chemotherapy, certain diabetic conditions, headache conditions. Your friends, your neighbors, your family members, people in the community who are suffering from these serious illnesses and certainly the side effects from treatments, doctors have found over the years and many, many years of extensive research that medical marijuana is helpful to them. And your commission recognized that there may be a need for allowing dispensaries and or production facilities in Newington. You did the regulations. What we're proposing tonight is some relatively minor changes to the regulations. When you set it up in 2014, you limited it for both production facilities and dispensaries to the industrial zones. And we're proposing that you add the BT Berlin Turnpike zone as a acceptable location for the for a medical marijuana dispensary. And again, the amendment we're proposing keeps the allowing in industrial zones, but also adds BT zone for dispensaries only. Production facilities, which is not what we're talking about in the special permit application. We're talking about a dispensary, which I'll talk about in a little bit, but the production facilities under our proposed regulations would stay in industrial zones only as you adopted back in 2014. As in an effort to allow and move forward with a special permit application, it became clear that the distance restrictions that you had put in place in 2014 make it very difficult, even in an industrial zone, to have a medical marijuana dispensary. And so the other proposal that we have made is that the distance requirements for dispensaries, distance requirements of 1,000 feet from things like churches and schools and recreational facilities, that those be eliminated. And again, because they're allowed in industrial zones, and if you agree with the amendment, in a BBT zone, your special permit requirements, which would go over as far as a special permit application, provide sufficient buffering. There's minimal areas of issues in terms of distance. Because you have sufficient buffering situations in the industrial zone and, of course, in the BBT zone, which we're proposing. The BBT zone is pretty much a retail zone. Now, we know that there are daycare facilities, there are churches. There are different uses that have located in the BBT zone and to some degree perhaps in the industrial zone. But again, the type of restrictions and controls that the Department of Consumer Protection requires the applicant to provide on site for the particular location is certainly clearly a situation that protects the citizens and the concerns where you had, some concerns about distance requirements, 1,000 feet from a daycare center, 1,000 feet from a church. The locations, the Department of Consumer Protection requires lots of security. Only certain people can ever get into that particular pharmacy. The pharmacy that would be proposed is only 600 square feet. It's not a typical pharmacy like a retail pharmacy, like a CVS or a Walgreens, where any kind of customer can walk in those doors. No, you have to have a special ID card given to you by your doctor through the requirements of the Department of Consumer Protection. So again, these are further restrictions that are placed on anybody accessing it. So that's one additional level of buffering, not to mention the fact that, the location we're proposing is, a good distance and from the church uses that are on the Berlin Turnpike, from the daycare uses that are on the Berlin Turnpike. So this commission has a real opportunity to, and really with these, what we found is that unless these text amendments are considered, there's really not going to be a possibility to allow a dispensary in the community. And these dispensaries certainly can help a lot of people. I indicated the medical issues that can be resolved with medical marijuana, but with looking at, Mr. Chairman, the other experiences now in other towns and looking at the regulations and how they've adopted them and their experience, they haven't had public safety concerns. They haven't had issues with the not unauthorized people getting access to these dispensaries. And the requirements are so strict, and quite frankly, the review process, which is going on right now with my client through the Department of Consumer Protection, they have to get their approval, And it's a very detailed process. It's a doctor and a pharmacist involved. They are going to be the principals running the dispensary. And they have, in addition to their requirements, they already have to comply with as a doctor in the state and/or a pharmacist in the state. They have many more strict regulations of the Department of Consumer Protection that they have to follow and comply with. And the expense and the effort to do this is one that certainly, when they get approved by the Department of Consumer Protection, it's not a license that they're going to take loosely, because they've made a tremendous investment of not only time but also financial resources to get that approval. So with this environment and with the experience of other communities, I think this commission can, we believe it can go forward and not be as concerned about the distance requirements, at least with dispensaries, as maybe you were concerned about in 2014. Reduce those requirements and be confident that the regulations in place through this Department of Consumer Protection and the requirements that your zoning application process has through the special permit process, buffering other issues, conforming the use to the location. In this case, the Berlin Turnpike. This essentially is, even though it's very regulated as to who can get in the door, it's still essentially a retail for pharmacy location in terms of once you get in there, you can only, you have to be authorized to get in, but then, you can determine with the help of the pharmacist what medical marijuana products are going to help your particular condition. And again, there's no other thing sold there. It's just a dispensary for medical marijuana. So those are the only people going in the door.
Okay.
So.
Very good. Thank you very much. It's a public hearing, so we're going to go to the public. Anybody wishing to speak in favor of this application?
Hi, my name is Dennis Morgan, and I never met this gentleman before, nor did I know this was on the agenda when I came here tonight. I'm a retired cancer specialist, and I can tell you without a doubt that there is true medical benefit to marijuana, and that it is not known to kill people. Alcohol is definitely related to medical deaths, not only of a physical nature, but through drunk driving. So if this is the same commission that just allowed for that enormous package store to go up on Main Street, next to Starbucks, where the high school kids hang out, and across the street from the church, and kitty corner from an ice cream store, I certainly think that you could find room for a medical marijuana retail shop on the Berlin Turnpike. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else wishing to speak in favor? Anybody else wishing to speak in favor? Anybody wishing to speak in opposition? John, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
Just very quickly on not on this application, but on the.
We're going to go to that next.
Okay, all right, very good, yeah.
I'll turn over to the town planner to see if he has anything he wants to add to this.
No, just the memo that I prepared has all my comments on it.
Okay. Commissioners, you have anything that you want to request? Can I entertain a motion to close this public petition and move it to our next meeting?
Make a motion, close this petition and move to the next meeting under old business.
Okay. Motion made by Stanley and seconded by Anthony.
No, Michael.
Michael, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Okay, and if the secretary could read our next petition, which is petition 20-18.
You need a vote on that.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
No worries, Stanley brought it up.
Yep.
We were sleeping over here, sorry.
Petition 20-18, if you could read it.
Petition 20-18, special permit, section 6.16.3, medical marijuana dispensary at 2272 Berlin Turnpike. Sedan LLC, owner applicant John M. Kelly, 66 Cedar Street, Suite 208, Newington, Connecticut. Contact continued from June 13, 2018.
Good evening again. I'll just, I know it's been a long night. I'll briefly just point out that if you approve the text amendment, we're asking obviously for the approval also then of the special permit, 2272 Berlin Turnpike. It's a medical building. This is, obviously for medical marijuana. In fact, all the tenants who agree with this application, by the way, they're the medical tenants in that 2272-2294 Berlin Turnpike support this application. It's very consistent with the services that they provide in that building. And in terms of the location, in your regulations for special permit, we're asking that, obviously it's a special case, and this is the proper board and proper public hearing to have this considered. And the criteria that the commission looks at is on special permits, as I'm sure you're all aware, is the need. And of course, we don't have currently a medical marijuana dispensary within Newington. And really the closest ones there's one in Hartford and there's one out in South Windsor. And again, we have many members in the community that need this medical medicine, and also in the immediate adjacent area, towns like Weathersfield and other towns may have a need for it. It's very consistent, being in the Berlin Turnpike. It's going to operate as like I said, a retail location, about 600 square feet, only selling the medical marijuana products, but again, it will be like a retail location, with the exception that you have to have a special pass to get in. There's going to be no changes to the existing building other than interior renovations to the building. So there's not going to be any changes in terms of parking issues or traffic issues. Your commission approved the medical building about 2 or 3 years ago, and there's no traffic problems or anything. Obviously, it's hooked up to public water and public sewer, so there's really no issues there. The signage, the Department of Consumer Protection is very strict on what kind of signage they allow, and it's designed to be pretty discreet. And this particular retail location is going to be at the back, so it's not even going to face the Berlin Turnpike. It's going to be at the back. It's going to be in a discreet location. Only the people that are authorized to know where it is and get there are going to really know where it is. There is minimal signage that's allowed just to kind of let people know that it is one of the tenants, but it's not going to, and don't think of it as a regular pharmacy that you see in other retail areas of town. You're not going to have big advertisements. There's not going to be a lot of signage, because it's not permitted. It's designed to be discreet. These the idea behind that is folks that need this generally have serious medical problems, and they'd like to keep it discreet. Their medical, the fact that they may need this, they might want to keep that discreet, and the Department of Consumer Protection recognizes that. This particular building is surrounded by, the veterinary hospital. There's retail stores. Much up the turnpike is, other retail stores, a bowling alley. There are 2 daycare facilities, but those are way up the road. There's lots of buffering in terms of other businesses, other uses. The commission is very familiar with this location. But again, it meets that requirement, provided that the distance issues is taken care of in the zone text administration, zone text amendment. So, this commission really has a great opportunity here. I mean, if you consider this change and consider this special permit, we'll be able to help a number of your friends and family members in the community. It'll certainly reduce one burden right now of their care, which is they have to go several miles out of town to get their medical marijuana products, those that need it and those that are authorized to have it. So I ask you to give it some consideration and, hopefully we can do right by the people that need this the most.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. I'll ask the town planner if he has anything he wants to add.
No, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Commissioners have any questions for the attorney? Okay, we're going to go to the public. Anybody wishing to speak in favor of this application, please come forward. Anybody wishing to, please come forward.
I confess I'm a little confused. I haven't been to this meeting before, so I don't know why the gentleman spoke twice about it.
The first application was concerning a text amendment to change the regulations, and then the next amendment is the actual application from the particular location.
Okay. So I just had one further comment. As I was listening to the way this proposal is couched, I think it clearly anticipates some sort of resistance, and unfortunately cloaks the idea of retail marijuana in the garb of like a pornography store. This language about retail marijuana shouldn't have to be sort of protected from misperceptions about what it really is. This isn't something that you need to hide from the public. And apparently, I think the state laws probably are trying to do that, which I think just feeds into the prejudice about medical marijuana. So I would just urge you to think hard about avoiding any negative language that is sort of used, and it's just for a way to try and say, oh, well, marijuana is okay. It's okay. It is medicine. I can tell you that.
Anybody else wishing to speak in favor of this application? Anybody else wishing to speak in favor? Anybody wishing to speak in opposition? Okay, do I entertain a motion on?
Make a motion, we close and move to old business next week meeting.
We have a motion and second?
I had a question.
Okay, let's go to the question.
Simple. Mr. Minor, is in the bottom of your memo about the Weatherfield resident, is that resident here at this time?
I don't see him.
Okay, that's all.
Okay, very good.
Just wanted that on the record.
Okay, we have a motion on the table. Question's been answered. Do we have a second?
Second.
Mike?
Seconded by Michael Camillo, and motion made. Do we have any discussion on it? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries to move this to our next meeting. Okay, if the secretary could read the next petition for public hearing, which is petition 33-18.
Petition 33-18, special permit section 3.11.6, restaurant at 14 East Cedar Street, Newington Development Associates, LLC, owner TJ's on Cedar, applicant Timothy Jarrell, 71 Stafford Ave, Newington, Connecticut, contact.
How are you tonight? I'm Tim Jarrell, owner of TJ's. I'm representing Newington Development as well. They submitted a plan to me today for expansion of the parking lot and relining the lot. So if I could hand that out to everybody, I'd love to do that. That way.
Just send it this way.
Thanks.
Oh.
Might be needing one more. Well, as you all may know, I'm part of the center of town, and I'm looking to expand my business. We were working with the town throughout our remodel to expand into the comic book store, which was next to our restaurant. Throughout the plans, we submitted architectural designs and everything, and then when we submitted the liquor permit, it was brought to our attention that we might need more parking. This is the plan that they've brought to me to expand our parking, which makes a better flow and easier to do business. We're looking to grow with the town. The town is expanding and growing. We're looking to do the same. We're just here to work with the town and see if we can get a plan approved. When I started the remodel, I was under the impression that we were included in the town business district parking that was across the street. So I was under the impression that we'd be included in that. I wasn't aware that I would need more parking, but now that it's brought to our attention, this is the design that we've come forward with at this point.
Okay, do you want to explain a little bit about what you're doing inside?
Sure. We're expanding our space. It's a little cramped inside. We would like more space. It would be easier to do business. The flow of the restaurant would be easier. When we have gatherings and so on and so forth, it's very difficult to do gatherings. With the expansion, one of the walls would be opening. We would lose some of our tables. Those tables would go into the new room, just creating an easier flow. That space would also allow me to use that as a individual space which I could block off and have parties, so on and so forth.
Okay, very good. I'll ask the town planner for a small report on this.
Right, as I said in my memo, the only concern the staff had was whether there was sufficient parking, and the applicant just submitted a plan showing parking spaces. Obviously, I can't evaluate that now because I don't have my scale and so forth, but if this does in fact show 65 parking spaces, then the staff has no objection to approval.
Okay. Questions from commissioners?
Is the, Mr. Minor, is the calculation to take all the other establishments in that block?
In the building,
Well, yeah, the retail side, the residential side also of that building?
everything in the building, yes. Yeah, the apartments upstairs, the residential apartments upstairs, and the retail stores downstairs.
Just to refresh my memory, where the number 15 is that the old comic store there? Is that corner?
That's correct.
Okay.
It attaches to my lounge area, which.
And that
yep.
goes to that stairway to go upstairs, like the entry to go upstairs.
There
On
is
the
a rear,
backside.
there is a rear entrance on the backside that is direct entrance to the parking lot.
Yeah.
But there's also an entrance to the canopy, yes.
Okay.
But there's a
It's that little
separate,
corner in that back of that where number 15 is.
there is a separate entrance for residents there besides the canopy.
Any other questions? We're going to open it up to the public. Anybody from the public wishing to speak in favor of this application, please come forward.
So, Dennis Morgan, 944 Main Street. I'm going to get off my high horse now. This is why I came here tonight. Tim didn't know I was going to be here. I do know Tim. So, yeah, I was just eager to give a voice in favoring the expansion of the restaurant. I mean, I live right across the parking lot in that big yellow house. I can see that parking lot from my living room. So I can tell you this, that the only time I've ever seen it anywhere close to full was in the evening when the restaurant was in full swing and everybody else is shut down. So I really don't see how parking is in practice a real issue. On my way over here, I counted 70 spaces just to my eye. That's not including some areas by the dumpster that you could use or the ones that are lined out in front of the restaurant. So, I mean, it seemed to me, and by the way, the reason I knew about this was the sign that was posted in front of the restaurant, public hearing, so I was curious, what's that about? So it seems to me that, parking should not be the thing that would inhibit someone who has really invested a lot, I think, to make that a lively part of the town. And I think that that's the sort of thing we want to see in the Newington Center area. And I don't think the parking's a big deal. I can tell you that firsthand.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments. Anybody else wishing to speak in favor?
Carol Annis, 30 Harding Avenue. Speaking in favor of this petition, this is a small business that wants to expand, and I think this is what Newington is all about, is growth and progress. So I would urge you to support this expansion of the parking. I also would ask that you review your town center business district and possibly include this piece of property in that. I mean, there could be a possibility that he could want to even expand further. And because of the crosswalk and the proximity to the town center parking, that this would be an added piece of property to that town center business district. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak in favor? Anybody wishing to speak in opposition? Anybody wishing to speak in opposition? Hearing none, could I entertain a motion to close this public hearing and move it to old business tonight for discussion and action?
Make a second.
So moved by Commissioner Fox and seconded by Stanley. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. So we'll be acting on that later on tonight. Okay, next thing on our agenda is approval of the minutes of July 25th, 2018.
Make a motion to approve.
Made and seconded. Any discussions, any corrections? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries to approve the minutes of July 25th. On new business, and I don't know if the Mr. Hollister is still here or not. If you could check the hallway. I think he might have been confused on the site plan thing. Okay, we're going to, let's see, 2718 is tabled. We have petition 3218. If the secretary could read that, please.
Petition 32-18, accessory outside use, section 3.23.1B, at 225 Richard Street, H.O. Penn Machinery Company Incorporated. Applicant, N.W. Branch, LLC. Owner, Anthony Bannister, 225 Richard Street, Newington, Connecticut. Contact.
Okay, is the applicant here?
Good evening. Anthony Bannister, speaking on behalf of H.O. Penn. And our application is to permit the addition of some hardscaping on the eastern edge of the 225 Richard Street parking lot, indicated on the screen there with the red arrow. Yes, there. It would run approximately this space would run from the fence, existing fence at the yard, which is at the bottom, where that grey area just below the parking lot is, and runs at 160 feet up to approximately 2/3 of the way to the edge of the parking lot on the northern side, and then it's about 30 feet wide, and it would be space for putting some of our smaller construction equipment out so that we have some visibility to people at the evenings and weekends who might come to view our product. The detail on the next slide, if I could trouble Mr. Excuse me, Town Planner might shows what we're looking to do, which is to cut slightly into the banking that is on the right-hand side that moves up towards our lot line, making sure that we stay well within the or well beyond the 1-to-2 ratio for the slope. There would be a retaining wall, and then in front of the retaining wall, but to the right of the parking would be the space for the machines. Now, these machines would be enclosed by a fence, which would be a continuation of the yard fence, which comes to the edge of the parking lot. The intention is to cut a section of about 20 feet or 30 feet of the fence, and then run up the parking lot, across, and then back down and rejoin the fence. So it'd almost be a finger of yard protruding up on the side of the parking lot in reality, as far as the fence is concerned. While we're doing this, we noticed actually through the help of the surveyor that there is actually a drainage swage, I believe it's called, running down the edge, which over the years has gradually become filled in with residue from the ploughing and the sorting, etc. And the intention is to just lay down a drainage pipe underneath the proposed hardscape so that we improve the drainage. If we're going to be, if we're given permission to do this, we would improve that drainage and remove the somewhat sogginess that we get up at one end and a little bit of overflow onto the edge of the parking by improving the draining, and that would drain out into the existing ditch at the southern end, just where the double arrow is at the bottom of this image. And really, that's what we're proposing. In terms of the view from the street, if it'd be possible to accelerate this, move the slides forward one. Sorry.
Other way.
If we could keep going a little bit. Okay, so sorry. Yes, so here we are. This is the view from the street. The yellow markings on the picture are superimposed to indicate where the machines would sit, and to give an impression just at a distance that that's the kind of view you would see moving from west to east along Richard Street. And then if I could ask you to move forward one slide. Coming the other way, you would just see, you'd see much less of it when you're going from east to west, because as you come through the lights and over the brow of that slight hill, you'd look to your left and you'd be seeing the narrow end of the display. And that would be the extent, hopefully, of the visibility from the road. So it's really to capture people who are driving up the street from west to east, to give them visibility, and then if they come into the parking lot at the weekends or in the evenings, the opportunity to see the product laid out neatly in the space that we're proposing.
If the town planner could go back a couple to, I think, number 5. Four. Try 4. Yeah, that one. Could you explain for the commission, if you could get rid of the bar?
Nope.
No? Okay.
Wait,
There's,
wait,
you have a fenced-in area down here.
Oop.
You have a fenced-in area down here. Could you explain why you can't use that area there as a display area instead of this? And how you're going to deal with snow removal, because the fence is right along the curb. So for this quadrant here, you're either going to have to take all that snow this way or do something else. So if you could explain those two things, and then if the town planner could address whether or not this needs LID.
Certainly. That's a great question, actually, and that's the reason we're looking at this space on the right-hand side. To the point you raised, why couldn't we use that already paved area? That area is actually used for the storage of the field service vehicles when they come back in the evening. So the vehicles that come back in, they're the large white ones that you'll have seen in the neighborhood. They all come back in at various times in the afternoon and are parked in there along with other vehicles such as the service pickup, etc. And the service department really are struggling with another place to put those vehicles in the evenings when they're not in use. I mean, there is space down at the back of the yard, but we're going down into the somewhat dirty, I know we're a dirt-moving company, but we move back into the back of the yard, and it gets a bit boggy down there, and these are vehicles which they're sending out to customers, and we want them to be looking neat when they go out. So that's why we keep them up there. It's to keep them from getting covered in the red dirt that we have down at the back of the yard. So there is a desire by the service team to keep those products there, or those vehicles there, which prompted us to say, well, if we can't use this space, which was our initial idea, maybe we can use this space to the side of the parking lot. So it was really that was the reason we started to look at this as an alternate, so that we could keep the service trucks there in the evening where they have been, and then put product through the end of that tarmac area, so they'd have to leave a space to move through, and put the machines up on the side of the parking lot. Now, your second point is very valid, and we've had much discussion on that. It does raise an issue of where do we put the snow, and there has been talk just in the last couple of days, as people knew I was coming here, that would we need to move that fence back a few feet from the side of the parking lot, so have hardscape up to the edge of the parking lot, so that doesn't change, but where the fence is, that maybe moves back in line with the light posts that we have there, and gives us 6-7 feet to allow some snow to be pushed off there, and then the bulk of the rest of it would have to go north. It can't go south because we've got the fence to the yard. If we could have at least one push in, a parking space worth of push in, big enough to pile up that, and then the rest of it be pushed up to the north, that would be the compromise that was being discussed, as I say, before this visit.
Do you have enough room to provide a little bit more than just 4 or 5 feet?
There's no
or would
reason-
you have to go back into the embankment a little bit more then?
We'd have to
basically?
go back into the embankment a little more, but the surveyor said that we still have leeway, so we still can push back and still not be at 2-to-1, even if we did move back a little further. So if it was desirable that we allow more space for the snow removal, debris as it were, and then move back, we could identify with the surveyor how far back we can go before we hit that 2-to-1 red line.
Very good. Town planner?
Right, this is impervious, it's crushed stone, so it doesn't trigger the LID.
Okay.
I mean, it's pervious, therefore it does not trigger LID.
Okay, very good. So any commissioners have any questions? Commissioner Coffey?
I just have a question on the, I used to live across the street there on Richard Street, so I know the property pretty well. Never had a problem, but the white block, which would be the holding of the equipment, currently you have equipment on site, I've seen kind of on display, or an older machine that sits out front.
Yes, you're right, you're correct. Right in front of the vestibule door, we have a little D shape.
Hold on 1 second.
A lot of tapes tonight.
Okay.
Yes, Commissioner, we do have a D-shaped space just to the north of our path that takes us in, where we just put at the moment it's 4. If we've got a little micro, we might have the 5 on there, but that's really it. And that's great as like a tease for encouraging people to, that's obviously this is where you come for these, because one of the problems we found with our research over the last few years on the small product purchasers is that they saw us as just big cat machines, and this was a big parts department, and why would I go there? And so the intention of putting that D shape out there and putting those machines there was to let those kind of customers who maybe wouldn't initially think of coming to CAT, as they drive past, having passed competitors close by who have small machines out on the front, they come past us and go, oh, look, they've got some as well, and it just made it inviting. Now we're under some pressure from the Caterpillar organization to be more focused on that market, and that market is more inclined to come and buy, come and look after hours. I don't want to say kick the tires, that wouldn't be appropriate in our products, but have a look round in a more retail-based environment. And so what we're trying to do here is balance creating that retail environment, albeit behind a fence, that we would have our reps take the customers into and look around products that are neatly displayed, but also be cognizant of the fact that we are in a residential area. And so trying to keep it back towards the parking lot.
Maybe I missed something, but where the white block is, where the cars are parked, between where the cars are parked and the white block, is there a fence there? Or is it open and the fence is just on the back side against the grass to the next abutting property?
No, the way the fence works, may I move up to the screen and point it out? Thank you. So at the screen here, I'd like to just point this part at the bottom, which marks the different colours between the parking lot and this inside of the yard area. This fence runs across here currently right up to our neighbour's border. What we're intending to do is come across, and then at this point on the bottom left-hand side of the white rectangle, cut the fence and take out this stretch of fence, put in 2 strong posts capable of holding the required tensions, and then run the fence up across the northern end and then back down. And then across. So it would just be an extension of the fence. So it would be, in effect, the yard poking out as far as the fence is concerned.
Okay, I'm glad you clarified that, because I thought that people driving in would see these pieces of equipment. Okay, that's all. That perfectly, you've educated me well. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And I would assume that area is going to be for the smaller equipment because it's not large enough of an area to hold the bigger stuff. I am correct, right?
You are correct.
Okay.
It is what we call the building construction product or the CCE product. It's the smaller units.
Would you like to just take it back to your engineers and try to see if you can gain a little bit more snow space? To make sure that it's designed correctly so that you don't end up with some problems down the road, and then bring it back to us for our next meeting?
Certainly.
Anybody else have anything else, commissioners? Town planner? Okay, we'll do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Commissioner.
Okay, we're going to go to old business now. If you could... It's just old business on your agenda. Petition 36-17, if you could just read that.
Petition 36-17, special permit, section 6.2.5, freestanding sign at 3318 Berlin Turnpike on Costello Road. Stone Rock LLC, owner Michelle Lawrence, 55 Willowbrook Drive, Berlin, Connecticut, applicant.
Thank you very much. This is for the sign on Costello Road. Town planner, you have anything on us?
Well, in my report, as I said in my memo, as I started to prepare the report a week or so ago, I went back and did some history, and I realized that the applicant made some significant improvements to the driveway at the commission's request, pretty much explicitly as a condition of granting it. So I just wanted to remind the commission of that because the commissioners might have forgotten about that.
Okay. Commissioners, how do you feel on this? We talked about this briefly last meeting.
This was for, let me just clarify.
This is for a sign for the rear lot.
Yep.
I brought up the last meeting that I thought that it really technically wasn't a rear lot. I I don't have a problem if the commission wants to do like a one-sided sign like we did for Prospect, for the property up there that wasn't really technically a rear lot either, if we treat it like that. I'll open it up to commissioners, see what you think.
He made that, the original drawing, the sign was larger, wasn't it?
Well, the first application last fall was much larger.
Yeah.
Right. But the one in front of you, before you, is smaller.
Yeah, with the no improvements, one thing, but there's still not that much room for it, but I don't see any reason why not.
Anybody else?
There's a draft motion in the agenda packet.
Somebody have the motion? Oh, okay. Go ahead, Michael.
Petition 36-17, special permit, section 6.2.5, freestanding sign at 3318 Berlin Turnpike on Costello Road. Stone Rock LLC owner, Michelle Lawrence, 55 Willowbrook Drive, Berlin, Connecticut. Applicant contact. I move to approve petition 36-17, special permit, section 6.2.5, freestanding sign at 3318 Berlin Turnpike at Costello Road. Stone Rock LLC owner, Michelle Lawrence, 55 Willowbrook Drive, Berlin, Connecticut. Applicant.
Second.
Contact. Conditions, none.
All right, so we have a motion on the floor and seconded. Discussion? Was it proposed as a double-sided, correct? Do the commissioners agree that maybe we should make it single-sided like the Prospect Street sign that we approved before, so everything's consistent?
But you'd have to see it coming up.
Yes.
Yes, so you'll see it as you come up Costello Road. It'll be a single-sided. Is that all right with the motioner and the seconder to add that as a condition? That it'll be,
As a condition, it'll be a single-sided sign with the sign facing west.
okay. Anything else? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, very good. And we have a petition for old business that we added, which is petition 33-18. That's in the...
It's in the folder?
It's in the folder here, Mike.
Petition 33-18, special permit, section 3.11.6, restaurant at 14 East Street, Newington Development Associates LLC owner. TJ's on Cedar, applicant Timothy Jorrell, 71 Stafford Ave, Newington, Connecticut. Contact. I move to approve with conditions petition 33-18, special permit, section 3.11.6, restaurant at 14 East Cedar Street, Newington Development Associates LLC owner TJ's on Cedar, applicant Timothy Jarrell, 71 Stafford Ave, Newington, Connecticut. Contact. Conditions: 1, the applicant shall demonstrate to the zoning enforcement officer's satisfaction that there are 65 parking spaces on site.
Okay, motion made
Second.
and seconded. Discussion?
Only discussion I have is, are any of the parking spaces, I don't know if anyone thought of this, deeded to those residential properties upstairs?
Well, that's taken into consideration. We did the calculation. You asked me if we consider the apartments. Yes, we did when we determined how many spaces are necessary.
Okay.
Okay.
So,
We're basing it on this drawing right here.
He's going to have to review this with the zoning enforcement officer per condition.
Right. The 65 number that I've used was what the CEO calculated based on his visiting the site, going to all the units, calculating how many uses are there, what the needs are. That's where the 65 number came from. Hopefully, the sketch that we just got tonight shows 65 spaces.
Well, it shows more than that. It shows 60 on the front page, shows 10 on the second page, an additional 5 on the next page.
Right, but hopefully they're all
Correct.
designed to code. That's
Well,
why
and
I'm not
that's-
assuming.
And I think that condition,
A stipulation that they're designed to the ADA code.
It's all there. That's why I said to the ZEO's satisfaction.
That satisfaction, I could say, yeah, it's
That's
approved
what-
and stamp it.
The ZEO is not going to sign off on it unless it meets all of the
In
requirements.
writing then.
what would you
It
like?
is. That's what it
One
says.
at a time, one at a time, one
It
at a
has the
time.
proper
What
age.
would you like to add to that condition,
Well,
Anthony?
this is getting back to things that you're proving with no drawing. It is a site plan modification to approve the amount of parking spaces, right?
No,
No.
no, it's not site plan
No, it's
approval,
a,
it's a special
it's a
permit.
site plan, special exception to approve the restaurant use in there. I think he's demonstrated he has parking. I think he's demonstrated that, that there's some parking that is used across the street that, that people walk over there sometimes. Even though technically it's not part of it, which I think this commission needs to look at in the future.
Agree wholeheartedly.
And he's going to have to show his map to the zoning enforcement officer and make sure that it meets his satisfaction. That's how I read it, condition 1. And I would imagine the zoning enforcement officer would cover all, make sure that there's handicap parking spaces and everything's to code.
That's my point, is there's nothing here that, this is like a bar napkin,
Yes,
Absolutely.
you're right.
Exactly.
right?
Right.
And I thought we tried to fix
We're-
that from approving bar napkins on plans.
We could make a second condition
But it
that they.
needs to show- this doesn't show
Updated
any-
site, how about this? Second condition, an updated site plan,
Doesn't have to be a site plan. No, I'm not asking, but I mean, if I go out to this, like, I was there today at that parking lot. I couldn't tell you heads or tails how many parking spaces, because they're not lined, they're not marked. And then we put the stipulations on other businesses in this town, it's like, we need it marked, we need it lined, we need to have the handicap, we need the walkways, we need this, we need that. That's all I'm saying here
all
is
right, so
don't
do you
turn the
wanna-
bus
do
to
you
try
want-
to get this in.
But that's why I left it at the zone, that's why I'm recommending the language that I'm recommending, zoning enforcement officer satisfaction, because the ZEO will look at all the regulations that he has access to, plus other ones that we might not even think about tonight. That's why it's best not to try to be exhaustive, because if you try to be exhaustive and you miss one, you're SOL, because you obviously intended to leave that one out, Your Honor. So better to leave it this way so that your ZEO uses his professional
You're not
experience
putting a satisfaction to what, though?
to his satisfaction, to his professional satisfaction.
do you want, do you
What I'm
want, do
saying is,
you,
what's the regulation that governs, we never do that.
There are
That's
many
half-
of them. That's why I'm
that's my
suggesting we
point.
not list them, because we might forget one.
Anthony, do you want to
I'm
put in
just-
here?
We're trying to, I'm not trying to hinder this, but go out to the site, it looks worse than some parking lots.
Okay.
It's, you can't
Commissioner.
differentiate any of the parking out there right now, and we're trying to say that it's gonna be looking like this.
Commissioner, could I have the floor
It's
for a
not-
minute?
Yes, sir.
Would you like to make the second condition that the spaces have to be painted out?
No, I wanna know what we're,
That's what he said he was
No.
gonna do.
forget it.
No,
Jesus.
I'm trying to understand, Anthony.
What I'm trying to be is consistent of a zoning group that we can. We have a business that has parking concerns. There are significant parking concerns out there. I'm not saying anything against their parking concern. The business is growing. But we're putting a stipulation that's to somebody's satisfaction when there's rules and regulations in place in our zoning book. Why aren't they specified here that they meet those specifications? We just had a text amendment a few weeks ago about changing parking requirements in this town. And now we're right here with a parking issue, and we're like, to the satisfaction. That doesn't bode well with me. Might with everyone else?
Well,
You're
I'm going
okay
to
with it?
try hard not to take offense because I know you didn't mean it that way, but that was offensive to the CEO to imply that he would be casual and lackadaisical.
It's
I know you didn't mean it
casual
that way, but that
lackadaisical
is what you
here.
are doing.
This is
All right,
casual
all
and
right.
lackadaisical.
No,
Is
it's
it
not.
not?
It's all encompassing without trying to be
All encompassing to what rule and regulation?
to the CEO's professional satisfaction. I'll add the word professional, if that makes a difference to you.
So
comply with
he
our
has
rules.
a rule.
Yes.
To what rule?
The zoning regulations.
To what
Comply with our
regulations?
zoning regulations concerning the dimensions of the spaces and all that.
The size
You're
of
saying, do
aisles,
you
the
want a
handi-
list
the
of
amount of
dimensions
handicap
of the
spaces?
spaces and all the details?
Trying to clean up that we're doing a napkin here. That's all. If you guys are okay with it, cool.
And the 65 parking spaces is what is required. It's not doing any favors for them,
Correct.
okay?
Mr. Chairman, may I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
That we put in that all parking spaces meet town and state requirements. Would that be?
That's something, that's a regulation, right?
Okay, so, could you say that one more time, please?
That all parking spaces meet town and state regulations. It's only a thought, I'm just wondering if that'll stop.
Thank you. Okay, is that okay with the maker and seconder? Okay. Okay, we have, and that, I think, helps the situation. I'll entertain a vote now. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, the next thing on the agenda is we have a petitions for scheduling. Petition 34-18. If you want to read that, Anthony, or Michael?
Yep. Petition 34-18, special permit, section 3.11.6, restaurant at 2391 Berlin Turnpike. JGF Holdings Company LLC, owner Matt Rosconi, applicant Dante Bofi, 108 Main Street, Collinsville, Connecticut, contact.
Thank you very much. Mr. Planner, when would you like to put that on the schedule?
The next meeting?
At our next meeting?
Right.
Okay.
It's the 22nd, I think.
We're going to go into the town planner report.
Right. Now, I had some business to conduct because the CEO asked me to convey to you 2 temporary signs that want to be renewed. These are both for mattress. These are for the mattress firm. Right. And the CEO gave me a PowerPoint presentation to show you, but for some reason.
You can just give us briefly. We're all familiar with
Okay.
it.
Well, you'll remember one of them. There was a wind waiver fellow in front and a banner on the building.
Yes.
And they want to renew that one, which is fine. But they would also like to substitute the banner for a small canopy tent type of thing, roughly 4x4, which would be on the parking lot over a temporary sign. And I'm not explaining it too well because, well, actually, I have a picture of it here. It will, maybe I should pass it around, but it's a little sort of like a tent. Yeah. Which is about the size of a card table. That mattress firm would like. Would like to cover their temporary sign.
I just wanted to get a little exercise.
Yeah, good. I was falling asleep over there.
That was when the wind takes this thing out of the broom.
Where's this? This is down by,
On the
Ann and Hope?
Berlin Turnpike.
That's
One of
the-
the mattress firms
the one
on
by
Berlin
Mechanical
Turnpike.
Surplus, isn't it?
I think so.
So that's what they want to hold their canopy sign with?
Yes.
With another canopy?
Yes. Yeah, not sure makes sense to me either.
So it's hanging from the inside of that
Yes,
canopy.
exactly. And it would be for the same length of time, I believe it's 25 days.
The reason is because they want to hang it out closer to the road then, obviously.
Probably.
Then instead of hanging it on the
5
building.
feet of the entrance.
Yeah, so, okay, so, it used to be on the building, is that correct?
Yes.
Close to the entranceway. Is that how it should be, just like last time? Guys, you want to renew this?
Just like last
Just
time.
like last time?
Unless they want to come back in and sit there and explain it to us.
Okay, so you have, everybody's in agreement to that? Okay, so you could give them the okay to renew that one as it was approved previously. Do you have another one?
Two of them, but both Mattress Firm.
Okay.
At the two different Mattress Firm locations.
Okay,
And the other one is exactly the same that they want to
Okay,
renew.
obviously, they haven't been in violation or anything, and they're adhering to the sign regulations, so this commission is in agreement to approve both of those for an extension, but designed exactly how they were before.
Right.
Okay. Okay, anything else in your planner's report?
No, that's all I have.
Any communication?
I don't have any.
Stanley, do you have anything?
No, nothing, other than Mary Ellen is retiring and they're having a party for her this week.
Okay.
Oh.
Commissioners have anything else?
Were you going to take action on the medical marijuana one tonight? I see Attorney Kelly is still here. I know he had asked that.
We
if
moved
you-
it for next meeting.
Oh, I think he thought,
No.
I know he submitted a letter asking if you could consider it tonight.
Act on next meeting.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that next meeting. Is that what the commission wants to do? Or do you want to have that conversation now?
We may as well have it now.
Might as well have it now.
Okay.
Make 'em wait. I see no problem with it.
So what are we discussing now?
Text amendment. I see no problem with either the text amendment or the special permit.
One we did move, and the other one we didn't do anything with.
We did, we moved them both.
Stanley?
I have no problems. I don't see a problem with either one of them, to be honest with you.
Anybody else? I'm shocked that you guys did a 360, completely changed compared to,
So which one are we talking about? There's two.
I guess they're talking about the text amendment. There's one on the text amendment, and then there's one on the application. So you're in agreement with the entire text amendment?
Yes.
As presented today,
Yes, as presented today, right.
Big difference than.
20-18 or what? 28-18? We specifically said we were moving that to old business to act on next meeting.
Yeah, that's true, we did. but-
Right.
So then how can we now?
Well, yeah, we're going to talk about this next meeting, I think. That's what we did. We moved them both to next meeting. Is that? Yep. Okay. Any other remarks from commissioners? I don't have any closing remarks. Motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you very much.